Tour Down Under. It's great to have your company. Of course, this is the stage 4, the Booper stage 4 from Norwood to Campbelltown, and we're just about to have the sprint here, guys. Cameron Meyer smack bang in the middle, past winner of this great race.
What we're seeing, live pictures of course, 37 kilometres into the race now. We're not quite to the line yet, but I don't think we're going to see a sprint. These boys are on a long-term mission. They don't need 3 seconds. There's the sprint point they've gone through. Jack Bauer's winning it officially. He gets a 3-second time bonus. Cam Meyer gets 2, and Andres Sings gets 1 point. The wildlife is out today, at least. They're not going the wrong way, are they?
Oh, and it took our cameraman a battery and a half to get that shot. He was zeroed in on that gum tree for a long time. Look at little Blinky Bill up there having a little nap in the gum tree. It is a beautiful part of the world. We're in the foothills of the Adelaide Hills, and look, they are gentle hills, but the Gorge Road is a ripping descent, and it's going to sort the men out from the boys.
Yes, it is. It's a new type of one of the many facets of professional cyclists. There are those that can go uphill. Paul could never do that. There are those that can go downhill. Paul could do that, and that's when he got back after he was dropped going uphill. So it's the long descent at high speed, 100 kilometres an hour, taking risks, and those that take risks usually win the day.
Well, we've had a few complaints from 1 or 2 of the weekend warriors when we're giving out the speeds that we're talking about the riders attaining, but I can tell you the riders will be touching 100 kilometres an hour at parts of this final descent today, and that is for real. That's serious speed.
Yeah, we do have a lot of weekend warriors today because it is a bit of a challenge day. As we look at the track map, Norwood to Campbelltown, 149.5k.
Yes, another nice distance for the day. Of course, we're always based in Adelaide. We moved out this morning to Norwood, and in fact, if you just nipped over the road, in about 10 minutes, you'll be at the finish line in Campbelltown. But not the way we're going here.
Unfortunately, not straight out after 25 kilometres, the climb of the day, Checker Hill, and it's a beast of a climb. It's 13%, by the way, through the sprint point that we've just seen just a few moments ago, Mount Torrens, Lobethal and Cuddly Creek, and then that fast downhill ripper that we keep talking about in Gorge Road.
Alrighty, so that is the track map, and it's been seen by a lot of people who aren't riding professionally as we have a look at the race updates in stage 4.
Yes, down in Campbelltown, if memory serves me right, this is on the very first route back in 1999. The world champion Peter Sagan playing to the crowd, so too the ochre jersey of the Tasmanian rider Richie Port. Port knows this route pretty well. Not sure about Peter Sagan. It's only his second visit since 2010. Out on the highway, a number of attacks got caught, then these 3 got away. Jack Bauer powering at the front, coming over from New Zealand where he won the national time trial championship. Cameron Meyer, a former winner of this race back in 2011, and Andres Sink in the red there, he's never even ridden a race at this level before, and he's in the breakaway.
Yes, 7 years a mountain biker. Then he decided to join the Bahrain team, as you can see in that red jersey there. And when he got to the steepness of this climb and Phil, we're looking at 13% on the slopes of this 600-metre final kick up to the finishing line. Well, for a former mountain biker, not much of a problem at all. He got over the top, got himself maximum points, 10 points for the win in the second category climb, and he will put that into the bank. But still 2 positions available further down the road, and that is what I think would be even more important as we look at the main field now. They're getting themselves onto the slopes of Checker Hill.
Yes, you may recall yesterday Thomas Agent's winning on Selix Hill, and in fact we think, and we haven't got the full result yet because these are a look at the race so far. This is Jack Bauer taking him through the sprint we've just seen. We think that Thomas Agent may have got either 1 or 2 points, which is going to give him a clear lead now in the Subaru King of the Mountains competition. So
we're at the finish line here, of course, and that is in Campbelltown, and we're looking at live pictures across the way. The crowds here are enormous. They're here enormous every day, but there's a bit of an extra tinge to today because many of the people in the crowd are those that have ridden at least part of this stage, because it's an opportunity for those that don't do this professionally but love cycling to get on board the deck that the competitive, the professionals, here's some of them here, and you get shapes and sizes, ages. It's brilliant.
Well, pick any figure between 5,000 and 6,000 because that's how many have registered for this event. And we're looking now at here 10 to 1. They've been coming to this finishing line since 9:30 this morning and riding all the way up. Everybody, different attitudes, waving to the next of kin and, well, that's the wrong word, but you know what I mean, their friends and folks. There's the actual map today of the contour.
As you can see, it was a very hard starter, that little profile to begin with, but all the riders talking about the last part. If you look at around about 130 kilometres into that profile map, you can see that's the start, dropping down into Cuddly Creek, a little bit of a ripple before, and then the descent down to the finish, right down to the finishing line here in Campbelltown, high speeds.
And that's the point that you guys made before. Jack Bobridge had the opportunity in a small group to really turn it on that last descent. So if the breakaway gets there, they'll be hard to catch.
And still 111 kilometres to go, Tim, but remember the breakaway went very early a couple of years ago when Bobridge won, and they never got them. They got onto the back wheels, but they never passed them on the line. It was a fabulous finish.
If you look at the time gap, they're not giving them that much of an advantage. If these guys want to start dreaming about winning the stage today, you've got to see that time gap go to around about the 5-minute margin. Although the big advantage on a circuit like this is, we always say in cycling, out of sight and out of mind. And on these tricky roads, these rippers are down into the gorge road, that breakaway group will be out of sight for a long time to come.
I don't promise to have any extra powers, but I've got this feeling something special is going to happen today. There's something about this today.
It's a double-headed stage in many ways. For the race leaders, they want a safe day and do their attacking tomorrow. For the other riders here, then we're looking at people who could take the chance and they could win the day. Could be a good day. All
right, we'll let you go to commentary. Okay, you get the air conditioning.
I'll work on it.
You stay with us. Yeah, you stay with us for a few moments' time, and we're going to have a look at the tour track here. Of course, get to the Santos Tour Down Under website. All the information you could possibly need on the riders, on the teams, on where they're all from. Every little tidbit of information that you could possibly think about is on the tour tracker. And of course, you can ask Robbie McEwen questions. Now, Robbie is a multiple winner of both here in stages and at the Tour de France, and he's a fantastic fella. Ask Robbie TDU. Hashtag Ask Robbie TDU. Get on Twitter and ask the big fella a question. He's also very good at bringing us our stage previews. They've been fantastic through the course of the week to give you a bit of an insight as to exactly the way each stage works. Here's Robbie McEwen previewing stage 4.
Behind me is the sleepy township of Lobethal, but today it'll be lit up by the peloton as they start their charge to the finish line right here. The last 25 kilometres of this stage is an amazing stretch of road to ride.
There is such incredible organisation going down Cuddly Creek descent.
Mostly downhill, it all starts with a super fast dive down to Cuddly Creek. It's from here that it gets tricky. The technical, sinuous descent of the Gorge Road actually favours a small breakaway group. Compared to the peloton, they can take a much faster, more streamlined approach to the bends. They're about to hit the fastest part of the downhill on this Gorge Road. The peloton relies on its power in numbers. This road, with its many twists and turns, prevents the peloton from using its numerical advantage and gaining momentum. On a flat, open road, the break could easily lose up to 15 seconds per kilometre. But on a road like this, the chasers will be flat out to claw back just a few seconds. By the very nature of this road, it's impossible for the peloton to visually gauge how much they're gaining on the breakaway. They won't be able to see them until they're right on top of them. In 2015, Jack Bobridge proved it is possible to maintain a gap, hang on and win on this course.
Then come the cavalry, but it's all too late here.
That day, the peloton underestimated the speed the leading riders could maintain down Gorge Road, and Bobridge took an against-the-odds victory.
Bobridge gets the victory. What a finish.
If everything comes back together, it'll be an enthralling sprint. And as the riders fly through this final bend, they'll have 1.2 kilometres to go. It's going to take a combination of speed, endurance and pure grunt to outlast your rivals on the long, gradual drag up to the line. By this time, they would have spent 4 hours in the saddle, but it will only be the last 15 seconds where the difference is really made.
Give this man a round of applause. What a tremendous ride.
Great to have your company, Adelaide, South Australia, and just for you, Paul Sherwin, some alpacas running in the field.
Not indigenous, I have to say, to Australia, hailing originally from South America.
A peloton of alpacas to a peloton of cyclists. We are in the middle of stage 4, the Bupa stage, of course, from Norwood to Campbelltown. We've seen a whole series of hobby riders, recreational riders, and those that take it a little bit more seriously, competing on, well, not really competing, but on the same track as these guys. And this is our breakaway, Cameron Meyer, past winner of the Santos Tour Down Under, past winner of a stage in a breakaway, and he's part of a team that is doing a little bit of an underdog story this year.
Well, of course, yeah, you've got to think about Team UniSA. I don't think there's anywhere else in the world I've been where a university has sponsored a professional cycling team. Cam Meyer now coming back as one of the veterans, having retired from the sport, a former winner of the race, and he talks about his age. But this is a team which is up against the top teams in the world, teams that have got $15 to $25 million budgets, and that's American dollars. And these guys on the top of the overall classification. But it's an inspiration for them to be on the world field as well, because when they're racing against all of these World Pro Tour teams, the team managers are looking and saying, where's my next Aussie cyclist going to come from? Probably from Team UniSA.
Yeah, they are leading. They've got a narrow lead in the team, so it's quite an extraordinary story. Now, we've had a big week of racing, People's Choice Classic, then we started the tour on the Tuesday, so stage 4 now. Where are our riders at? What are they thinking? They've seen a lot of heat and they've seen the cool weather.
Well, it's the first big test of the season for many of these bike riders, and it's been a bit of a varied start, I have to say, over the first 3 days. We've had a little bit of heat, we've had a little bit of cooler weather, but for most of these guys, they recover extremely well. We're looking now back again at the live pictures, and I think you've got two fields of thought today. You've got the guys who want to win this bike race overall, trying to conserve as much energy as possible today, because they know tomorrow it's Wollonga Hill, and that's when they're going to have to make their final big kick to win this bike race overall. But then you've got a lot of new teams. You've got Abu Dhabi, you've got Bahrain. They're trying to get a first big win. So it's a very complicated race. And of course, throw in the little bit of spice of the descent down towards the finishing line. We're up for a great day. Yeah, it certainly is steep. Speeds over 100 kilometres. Well, Robbie McEwen loved going fast, and he was on the start line talking to the stars of the race.
Well, I'm here with, well, the man who a lot of people have come to see, Peter Sagan. Peter, yesterday you came a lot closer, third in the People's Choice on Sunday. Now, yesterday, very, very close, but you went the long way around to start the sprint.
Yeah, I did a little bit of mistake in the end, because I chose the left side and Gable went the right side, and could be much better to be behind him, but still I'm very happy I didn't crash in that big crash, because we went really, really fast, and it was just on my side, and I just went out without crash. That was really good, and well, I'm also happy for second place, and yeah, Caleb is now in a very good condition, and then it's really hard to beat him in the sprint like this, but we keep trying every day, and for sure one day will come also good results.
You know, I was a little bit too far back in that last case, so I was pretty, I don't know, I guess surprised to get up there, and luckily it was a headwind, so I could move up pretty easily.
Richie, you must be really happy with how yesterday went, quite relieved to get through the Victor Harbour stage, where you lost some time last year, but unscathed, leading.
Yeah, I mean, we saw again yesterday that it threw up a bit of a spatter in the works. Some GC guys lost time there, but we were in a good position all day, and look at, I think it's nice to get through that one, but let's get through today.
Today is one of those days that can go either way. It's going to be tough getting through the stage, especially with a start like this. I think it's really the last stage that a breakaway can succeed. So I think there'll be a lot of strong guys trying to go on the breakaway up this climb, which is going to make it hard for us sprinters.
Yeah, I'm ready for today, another day, sprint day. and yeah, I have a lot of strong guys in my team, so I don't need to be worried about that. But yeah, we will go for it 100%.
Can be good finish, but still, you'll see also Caleb how he has all the up and down mountains, and then we'll see. We try for sure.
I think the run down the gorge is always tricky, but look, I remember Jack Bobridge won 2 years ago down there, so hopefully we get another run like that with a bit of a break off the front and the peloton just strung out trying to catch it. I think that's the best for us.
Your last thought before I allow you to move into the cushy confounds of your commentary box?
Well, I think Caleb Ewan actually said it for me. It's a difficult stage to read today because you've got those sprinters we talked about, the sprinters like Ben Swift, like the other guys who want to win the stage. They know they've got absolutely zero chance tomorrow, so they've got to come out and play today. But on the other hand, you've also got the breakaway artists, you know, like Cam Meyer, who's in the breakaway right now. He knows this is probably the only day that the breakaway is going to succeed. So that's what gives today's stage that little bit of extra spice, and I'm actually starting to get a little bit excited about that run down to the finish, because we will have a nail-biter finish again down here into Campbelltown.
All right, we look forward to your commentary of that. Of course, that is the Gorge Road, the descent down Gorge Road, over 100 k's. We've got so much coming up. Of course, we've got the race. We're going to talk tactics with Robbie McEwen. You can ask Robbie some questions. We've got fan cam. We've got a whole stack of things. But most importantly for all of us, that charge down Gorge Road. Santos Tour down. Make sure you stay with us. We've got a great few hours of racing to come. It's been a wonderful week, and it's only getting better. See you soon.
So welcome back as we watch here, as we now see the riders here in right into the heart of the Adelaide Hills now, where the kangaroos abound along with the koalas. But at the moment the breakaway is losing ground. It's been away for quite a while. It's been over 2.5 minutes, but for some strange reason, although there's nobody in that threesome threatening the leaders, they've now decided to go hunting for them, because it's come back quite dramatically. It's just on a minute the last time check we received from these three leaders. Jack Bauer on the front, the New Zealand rider. 181 is Cameron Meyer, who won this race in splendour back in 2011 overall, and he's looking for a stage win if he can get it at the moment. Andres Stink, the Czech Republic rider at the back on the new Bahrain team. He's a rider who is riding his very first World Tour race. He spent many years as a top mountain biker, but now he's been persuaded to take part in just the road race scene, and he's in the breakaway today. It's a good day for a breakaway. It's well worth the gamble. We're showing 125, 97 kilometers to go. No more official climbs on the stage today, but anybody that knows the Adelaide Hills, and it's where the Australian Institute of Sport has done all of their training over the years, the road boys, it is a very difficult region. Perfect for cycling, great for strength training, and plenty of action. The peloton under the control, not surprisingly, of Team BMC. The best way to keep everything in place is to get on the front and marshal up the peloton, keep Richie Porte safe and sound, ride around him, try and make sure he's not in a situation like we had yesterday, when the peloton just inside the 3 kilometer mark all started to run into each other. Porte was very close to that, and that's all it takes, you know, to lose your hard-earned lead in a major stage race. These boys will just keep the tempo, but it's a very quick tempo just now. 97 kilometers to go. The gap is continuing in the descendancy now. And we heard Paul Sherwin say earlier on he thought it would be necessary to get probably 5 minutes with so much length of this course still to cover. Jack Bauer, the tall Kiwi, hardly has ever ridden a time trial in his life. He thought he'd have a go at the National Championships the other week, and the result was he won the title. And he was telling Robin McEwen before the start, off camera this morning, that this was a stage when he thought he would have a go. Well, it's paid dividends, Paul. He's got himself into the breakaway, but may have misjudged the mood of the peloton here.
I think there are so many teams in this year's race, Phil, who feel they've got a chance on a stage like this that you'll find a little bit of collaboration between different teams to make sure this breakaway doesn't get too big of an advantage, which is why I think the writing is starting to be on the wall that they want to pull this breakaway group back. And the fact is that if it's only 3 riders, it's a little bit easier to pull back than if it was a breakaway. Once it gets to 6, 7 or 8 riders, that's when the main field really start to panic.
Long thin line, so that's a sign that this is not just a little tempo ride, this on the long drags. They are actually doing their best to keep that breakaway within their gun sights, maybe looking for a springboard around the back, maybe around Loberthal or somewhere, to reach the leaders.
And they'll all be a little concerned, Phil, about the presence of Ondrej Šink, the rider from Slovakia, in that breakaway group, or Czech Republic, sorry, in that breakaway group, because he's only 57 seconds down in the overall standings, and they don't have any references at all on this bike rider. If you remember, a couple of days ago, he got himself into the break, and he still managed to finish inside of the top 30 when we got to the top of Paracombe. He's a mountain biker. He's been a mountain biker for 7 years. This is his first professional race. It's his first road race, and so for even the team managers, they don't know what that guy in the red jersey can do.
Still holding at 90 seconds here. Well, it wasn't long ago we came through this region and it was totally burned out by the bushfires. It was a very sad and sorry looking sight, but it's changed now. They've had a wonderful wet build up to summer, and as you can see, it's changed the scenery completely. Jack Bauer on the front, sort of breakaway. He once rode a breakaway in the Tour de France on the road to Nîmes. He was in the lead for 222 kilometers. He was caught 20 meters from the line. That was cruel. And
I have to think last year he was coming back to some really good form, and it was in the Tour of Britain he was in a breakaway, similar situation to that, and the breakaway was looking at each other on the running towards the finish, and I'm putting my hands onto my head and saying, no, it's not going to be another Tour de France type finish when he gets caught inside of the final kilometre. And in fact he won the stage but was given exactly the same time as the bunch on that stage in the Tour of Britain too.
Well, we've made our way up through the climb of Chequer Hill. Just to confirm the climb, the breakaway was establishing, in fact, on Chequer Hill at 25 kilometres. Sink was certainly the winner, but the runners-up was Anthony Roux and Jack Bauer. Roux fell back to the main field, and in fact, the polka dot jersey wearer, which is Thomas de Gent, didn't get any points at all. So he has kept in second place, but equal on points with Richie Porte, who keeps the lead overall going into the big showdown tomorrow on Wollonga Hill.
Yeah, tomorrow's going to be very difficult. It'll be a big battle for the King of the Mountains, but it's also a big battle for the final positions in the overall standings and who will wear the final ochre jersey. I just feel, though, Phil, talking to Richie Porte before and after the finishes, I can't remember him having the same confidence that he seems to be oozing as the confidence he has this year.
Well, we've got Cam Meyer in the break. He comes from Perth, Western Australia, and he's a rider who's won this race back in 2011. He may have other ambitions, though, on this escape. Let's find out.
I'd just like to get out there and have a crack. I'd like to maybe pick a stage and try and win a stage. That'd be really good. And if I can help my young teammates out and pass on a little bit of experience of how this race goes and the types of things that we can get out of this race, then that's my goal for the week, is to help them and just look for an opportunity myself on one of the days.
Well, he's taken the opportunity today because, of course, we recorded that a few days ago in the Tour Village back in town, and clearly kept his ambition and his focus on this event.
Well, you've got to think about the pressure on these Australian riders, Phil. Many of these guys, I mean, Cam Meyer that we're looking at here, he was racing at the top level of the sport way back in 2005 on the international circuit. And I just wonder how difficult it is to manage these riders abilities to keep them at the top level of the sport in the track, and then try and keep them interested enough to keep training to ride on the road. And I think that's possibly one of the reasons why he pulled out of the sport halfway through that last year. It was very difficult for him, but now all of a sudden he's got his head back together, and he's an inspiration to the other young riders on this Team Uni SA squad.
Yes, it's difficult maintaining your focus at professional levels year in, year out, and I think he needed that break, but it looks as though he's come back completely enthused now with the events. Well, we go through the trees here. We're beginning to see the trail behind, and it's not a good sign, I'm afraid. The gap is coming down. As we're looking at the three leaders there, it's not going to work, this one. I think I'm safe in saying this, as we head out towards the top end of the course, which is up by Williamstown. If it sounds familiar, we were through Williamstown a couple of days ago as well, but this time we'll turn away and head to Springton, and then come back down through Mount Pleasant, Tunkillo, Mount Torrens, and down to the finish with that enormous descent from Loberthal to the bottom.
Yes, if you look at the undulation map there, you can see the climb at the very beginning over on the left-hand side, but what everybody's talking about is once you go through Loberthal there at 120 kilometres into the stage, you've got that downhill part down into Cuddly Creek, a little kick up, and then a real rapid descent down the Gorge Road into Campbelltown. Now, if you go over that last climb with a minute and a half advantage, you've got the chance of taking the victory of the stage.
Just look at that reservoir. We were burnt out a couple of years ago. Now the reservoirs here full to the brim, and that really is good to see. People of Adelaide were getting rather concerned about the lack of water not so long ago.
Well, when we try to put it into perspective a little bit, when you talk about South Australia, very often you're talking about the driest state in the driest continent. So it is good. I know we had a massive big rainstorm last night, but you have to think of the positive side, and it keeps getting these reservoirs filled up for the cultivation that goes on here, because this is very much really one of the market bowls for the rest of Australia with the produce that comes out of South Australia.
It's gone up a little bit. It's gone up to 140 now, so maybe they feel they've got the mark now of the team. This is Moignard on the front just now, on the French member of the BMC squad. They're doing what they have to do. Keep the ochre jersey, who's on their team, nice and safe. And in fact, just behind him is a white jersey. Well, that's also a BMC rider, because that's Miles Scotson, who's just won the Australian National Road Race title in Buninyong over in Victoria. The gap's representing 1.2 kilometres at the moment.
And that's about right with the distance that we keep getting from the time check, 1 minute and 40 seconds. This is pretty much playing into the hands of Richie Porter. He wants to ride to the front. He's got a strong team. They brought a really solid squad here, BMC, because they want to win this bike race overall. And Richie Porter will stay to the front. He may well use a little bit more energy, but he certainly knows, just as we saw yesterday, how easy it is to lose a little bit of time because of an accident.
Well, there's no doubt in my mind that the three riders in the lead have got the all-round ability to win this race and stay away, but at the moment I think the peloton are very concerned about the strength, so they're going to just keep up to date and keep them in touch, and we'll take in the scenery. So as we continue our journey across the reservoirs here, we continue what is now a train under the escort of the men in red, because Team BMC have got this race very much under control. The men they want are behind them. Little concerned about the breakaway, because one rider, Andrej Sink from the Czech Republic and the Team Bahrain Merida, is only 57 seconds behind the race leader of Richie Port, who's on Team BMC.
Czech Bauer sitting at the back there, number 144, and this gap, I think it's a pretty manageable gap fill at 1.5 minutes. We've seen it's relatively about 1.2 kilometres, the physical distance between the three-man leading group and the breakaway group. But I keep looking at the team Movistar in the main peloton behind there. They're very close to the front of the peloton, looking after their man Gorka Izagirre, who was involved in that very, very dramatic crash yesterday, who still sits in second place in the overall standings at 20 seconds.
Said heading up to the furthest away point on the course, as we'll swing away briefly from one side of Mount Pleasant to the return on the other side of the town, because we go out in a loop which takes us up to Williamstown.
Get a chance there to see Gorka Izagiri. He's the 4th rider in that line of riders with the blue jersey with the green V on the middle, and you can see how badly damaged up he was. He crossed the line around about 7.5 minutes after the winner yesterday, but because of the 3-kilometre rule, he was given the same time as the main fielder that he was with, and he was taken immediately down to hospital to get a checkup to make sure there were no fractures. But he certainly has got a serious amount of road rash. We can see the bandages on his arm and leg, but I think probably the worst injury was the injury to his back shoulder.
Yeah, it's quite heavily road rash there. 51 kilometres done so far, with 149.5 today from where the riders actually were given the end of the deneutralised section. For the 5,000 or so cyclists who took part in the Bupa Challenge, they did the whole distance including the neutralised, so they were in the mid 155 kilometres for those that chose the full route of the race. Still coming in at the finishing line here in Campbelltown, while these riders are still well away from reaching the finish, so there'll be no overlap, of course. BMC riding extremely well, doing what we expect them to do at the moment.
Channel 9's Wide World of Sports. It's great to have your company, isn't it? Just beautiful. The scenery in and around Adelaide, just an hour away from the city centre. You can see all sorts of beautiful views. We're in the Adelaide Hills predominantly today, and this is stage 4 of the Tour Down Under. Thanks to Santos, and it's Norwood to Campbelltown, and it's our time to talk tactics, because Robbie McEwen, so far we've had sprinter stages, climber stages, pretty cut and dry. This is a bit different.
Yeah, it provides another opportunity. After 4 days of racing, there are riders who have already lost time in the overall classification, so it gives them a chance to try and attack and get up the road, form a breakaway, because they know what happened here 2 years ago, and this is really the only stage that gives them this opportunity realistically. So early in the stage, a lot of breakaway attempts, riders trying to form that group and break the shackles to the peloton. Very difficult to do, and form the right group. Get guys who have lost enough time to be let go by the peloton, who'll be back there riding for Richie Port, protect him from BMC. So very difficult to form the right one, but once you get out there, you just need to not only ride hard, but have the peloton somewhat let you build up a bit of a lead.
And Phil and Paul just mentioned that there's a couple of guys, the 2 guys around Cameron Myatt, that are just close enough just for the peloton not to allow them to move much further down the road.
It's going to make it a little bit difficult. We mentioned Andre Singh only at 57 seconds in the overall classification, so that's not far enough back to really be let go, so they're being held on a pretty tight rein. But even so, they've still got around 1.5 minutes or so. If they can maintain that gap and the bunch underestimates them somewhat and they can get to the top of the gorge with any sort of lead, then they're in with a little bit of a chance to defend it, because once you start diving down the gorge, it is so very fast, the top part of the gorge, and then it's really technical. So a small group has a great chance to hold off a chasing bunch, because they're unable to use their strength in numbers in the peloton due to the technical aspects, and you're very quickly out of sight. So a small gap has you out of sight, and there's a lot of slow and accelerating, so the bunch doesn't really get that roll on and find that momentum. And you know, Jack Bobridge 2 years ago, along with Luke Durbridge, Louis Westra, they, well, I wouldn't say pulled the wool over the eyes of the peloton, but they certainly tricked them a little bit, and Bobridge was able to hold off the chasing pack, outsprint his rivals, and take that magnificent stage win. Today, I'm not so sure of their chances to make it stick. The 3 that are out there at the moment, as we said, Sink's just not quite far back enough, and the sprinters want to get another chance. I think, seeing that Jack won here 2 years ago, it's not long enough ago for the bunch to have forgotten that already. So, but there's still a chance if they get too close, you could get a new group go up the road, and if it's the right combination, yeah, you could get guys build enough of a gap, get in that gorge, and hold them off again.
Mate, everyone's loving your previews. you're talking tactics, your interviews, doing a great job. Robbie McEwen here at the Santos Tour Down Under, and you can ask Rob a question. It's just hashtag Ask Robbie a question. Not too many curly ones so far. Ask Robbie TDU hashtag on Twitter. Keep it nice and clean, keep it nice and tight, and he'll try and answer a question. Let's get back to commentary.
Yes, he knows his stuff, Robbie, and we'll see how it pans out today as we're looking to 88 kilometres now, but the gap, it's painful, but it is going up again. 1 minute 45 we're showing now.
Well, the fact is, we're looking, Phil, at one of the best teams in the world, one of the teams that nursed Cadel Evans around the routes of France to win the Tour de France. They know exactly how much energy they need to dispense to have some in reserve for the final few kilometres. They also know that if they keep it pegged at around about the 1 to 1.5 minute mark, once they get that little bit closer to the finish, they'll get assistance from plenty of other teams. And I keep thinking about the two big new names of teams on the spot, United Arab Emirates and Abu Dhabi, and the Bahrain team. They're two new teams that have been put onto the circuit this year. They would love to get themselves a victory, so I would think they'll be quite keen. They've also got very good sprinters in their midst, Ben Swift being one of them on Abu Dhabi, and they will be assisting in the chase once we get that little bit closer to the finish.
Yes, a lot of people are watching and waiting just at the moment. It's not a hill full of challenging steep climbs today, a stage rather full of challenging steep climbs, but there's always undulations. This area we're in now, very popular with the club cyclists at weekends. They go right into the Adelaide Hills and make a full day of it. These boys are going to get round in just over 3 hours, of course. We're looking at the three leaders. They got away fairly early on. Jack Bauer, Cameron Meyer, Andrzej Sink, the Czech Republic rider. So we've got Australia, New Zealand and the Czech Republic in the breakaway. And the sun has now come out. It's got quite warm now, which earlier on today it was reasonably cool. But now I can officially say we're back in South Australia in summer.
Yes, well, it's still very much under the control of Team BMC riding along here. You can just see popping in there in the ochre jersey, Richie Porte. His team will nurse him all the way around this stage today because he knows he has to come out and play tomorrow. He will get an awful lot of challenges, but he has been the king of Wollonga Hill over the last 3 years. He knows that climb. He knows exactly what sort of effort he needs to produce to open up the gap. And the question is, will Esteban Chavez, who's in third place in the overall standings, have any chance at all to come out and challenge the superiority of Team BMC and, of course, of Richie Porte? And the other team, well, they're nursing a rider as well. They're sitting in the second row there, to use a good old rugby term, and that of course is Team Movistar. They're in second place in the overall standings, but their man had a very nasty crash yesterday, and that is Gorka Izagir. But really today's stage is a stage between a couple of interesting points, because it's a stage that goes out into the country for 150 kilometres, and this race at the Santos Tour Down Under is the brainchild of a guy by the name of Mike Turter.
To be it's 150k, so it's a long one for not only the riders but also for the people in the Bupa Challenge. The early stage of that particular day is quite tough, reasonable climbs to get out of Adelaide, and then after that she's undulating all the way through to Williamstown. Then we do a big loop down through Springton, come back through Mount Torrens. The Gorge Road does present a challenge. It's very fast. Some of those bends are quite tight. We've used it previously when Jack Bobridge won there. You might remember there was a group of 4 away, and it was sort of touch and go for the last 20k whether that group would come back, and they were good enough to maintain a very high speed through that windy section of the gorge going down the gorge this time, and they stayed away, and Jack won by about 20 or 30 odd metres right on the line. So it's a fantastic finish because she goes down and then it kicks up, and we do know that those uphill finishes, again, if you don't get your timing right, you're going to be in trouble. But I suspect the big group learned their lesson a couple of years ago. I don't think they'll let that happen again. So Caleb Ewan and the other sprinters will be licking their lips, I'm sure.
Yes, well, Mike Turter, since 1999, has been the director of the Santos Tour Down Under, and he's always looked for a little bit of a different recipe to spice up this race, and he did that this year with the long approach up to the mountaintop finish at Paracombe. Then, of course, the race yesterday, which ended up being a very interesting chase around Victor Harbour, and today it's a fairly standard Santos Tour Down Under race, but it will be dramatic. I think it's going to be a little bit of a nail biter once we start to charge down that gorge, because it is pretty technical. And we saw yesterday, just around about 3 kilometers to go to the finish, when somebody goes down, as Gorka Izagir did yesterday, it can affect the overall standings if it happens in the wrong place. And these guys, well, they've been in Adelaide for quite some time, and most of them have been out to check the descent, although it's an exciting descent, I have to say. But these leaders are certainly not being given too much of an advantage. It's still pegged in at 1.5 to 1 minute and 40 seconds. That's Andre Schinck. Cam Myers, the rider on the front. Sitting on the back, the champion of New Zealand in the individual time trial. That's Jack Bauer. Status quo really here for Team BMC. The race situation as we went into today's stage had Richie Porter on the top ahead of Gorka Izagir by 20 seconds, 22 to Esteban Chavez. The one rider who will be hoping it all comes back together is the sprinter on the Bora squad, and that's Jay McCarthy. He sits at 24 seconds in 4th place overall, and Nathan Haas, he's a pretty handy sprinter himself, and let's not forget there's 10 seconds, 6 seconds and 4 seconds time bonuses available on the finishing line. And there are a whole host of teams who've got good sprinters. You can just see that the new jersey there to the left hand side, the white jersey with the black strip down the middle, well, that's the new Team Sunweb. They've got a rider who could well do a good performance on tomorrow's stage, but they've got a good sprinter for today's stage in the form of the German rider Nikias Arndt. Bora Hansgrohe, that's the team of Peter Sagan. And there on the left hand side you can see the leader, or the wearer of the King of the Mountains competition. That's Thomas de Gent, winner of 2 big stages in 2 of the Grand Tours, the Stelvio stage of the Giro d'Italia, but maybe more famously last year the stage winner up to the summit of the Mont Ventoux. Trying to listen in there to a little chat between Richie Porte and his teammates, as this is the moment when they're not really under that much pressure. The pressure will start to be applied once we get a little bit closer to the approach to Cuddly Creek, and Cuddly Creek has got a technical little descent down into the beautiful little town of Cuddly Creek, and then you've got this sharp little climb away from it, and then you come down into the final descent of the day into Gorge Road. 2 big riders, 144 and 181, professionals, been professionals for quite some time. The gap 135. The question mark though is around this guy on the back, Andre Schinck. In fact, I spoke to him just a couple of days ago, and he said, well, I decided to have a crack at racing on the road. He said, but 7 years ago when I was a junior, I used to race with Peter Sagan and on the World Mountain Bike Circuits. He's from the Czech Republic, and Peter Sagan is from Slovakia. And of course he's representing that new jersey with a very classic look to it, I have to say, Bahrain Merida. So Bahrain Merida, they have got a good situation here, because they've also got a sprinter who's been pretty consistent so far since we got away from Adelaide early on. That's Nicolo Bonifacio. He can take a back seat in the main field while this is all happening. But it really is very much pegged. 81 kilometers to go to the finisher. That's around about 50 miles of racing. Shouldn't take these riders, it shouldn't take them 2 hours, because I would expect an average speed in excess of 40 kilometers an hour over the last 2 hours of racing. So there's Cam Meyer sitting in the middle. Been a professional since 2009.
Well, it's a beautiful view across the top of the Adelaide Hills here. The famous vineyards, the Barossa Valley and the McLaren Vale, Clare Valley, all taking a back step today as we continue to course around the beauty of the Adelaide Hills. And there's an alpaca down there. Well, he's got plenty of grass, but he's choosing to browse on the trees instead. It's another big industry in this area, Paul.
Well, it is. They're not actually indigenous to Australia. In fact, they hail from South America, and they were used originally in the Andean mountains as beasts of burden. But they do produce a very fine wool.
So these three boys have the ability to stay the distance. Well, can they? A couple of years ago when we had this stage, the break went very early. And in fact, it was also a Uni SA rider in a white jersey, just like Cam Meyer up the front. And his name was Jack Bobridge. And he won the sprint to the finishing line from his breakaway companions, and there was no time gap between them and the peloton. They were caught on the line, but in this occasion they weren't passed.
And I think that's why we've seen this breakaway group pegged at the 1.5 minutes. I don't think the main field wants to take the risk of having the breakaway start the descent with an advantage. That's why I think we'll start to see a bit of an acceleration. Now, once we get towards Mount Torrens and Lobethal, those very heavy roads, especially with the heat climbing up to about 24, 25 degrees Celsius, because from Lobethal you actually start to go downhill quite quickly into Cuddly Creek, and then there's a little launch pad for a breakaway before you drop down onto the final descent of the day into Gorge Road.
Didn't quite grab the time aboard there, but I think it was 1:35 he was showing these three riders just now. Concentration on the face of Jack Bauer. On a new team for Jack now. He's on the Quick Step Floors team, having spent a lot of time with the Cannondale squad. Before that it was the Garmin squad, the same setup in fact. Been with us since 2012. He left them at the end of the season, having won a stage of the Tour of Britain on his farewell season with Cannondale.
When he was riding the Tour de France in 2013, he had a really nasty crash on the running towards the end of one of the stages, right down towards the end of the event, stage 19, and he really got ripped to pieces when he crashed into a barbed wire fence.
Oh, it was horrible, and he was a weekend away from finishing the Tour at that time. Life has moved on for him since then. He's been a pro since 2010, so this will be his 8th season now. 78 kilometres to go. Long haul as we head up towards Williamstown, and then we'll swing around at the top down towards Springton. Well, Jack Bauer, as we're talking about him, let's have a look what it's like to be in a breakaway, because he was telling us what it was like before this race got underway.
It's generally a lot more constant than the races back in the bunch. Often it's a lot safer. It's like gambling, you know. You gamble on being up the road and the break may be staying away. There are days when you know that the break is never going to the line, but people want to be in the break anyway. That's just one of the interesting things about cycling. I generally try to pick a day when I think there's a chance for the break to stick, you know, for the break to fight for the win.
Well, he knows what to do, that's for sure, Paul, and I haven't made my mind up yet, but I think there is a possibility this break could stick.
Well, two riders we know have got a very good pedigree of being in the breakaway, Bauer and Cam Meyer. They've got the power to do it. The man we're looking at here, though, in the ochre jersey, Richie Porte, he's comfortable. I don't think he's too concerned about the breakaway. He knows his team can pull it back if they want to, so they're leaving these guys out to fry a fraction. Number 86 has been quite a nice revelation to us here, really. He's come into this sport from a background and a pedigree of mountain biking, and Jack Bauer, as he said, he knows which stages to pick, and we always thought that this would be a stage for a breakaway. And I like the quote that our mate Jens Voigt who used to ride for the Trek racing team used to say. He says, if you don't go into the breakaway, you've got no chance of winning a bike race, but if you get into that breakaway, at least you've got 10% chance of winning. Even though the break very often gets caught, it's that 10% when the breakaway succeeds which inspires guys to get into the breakaway move.
It worked for Jens, that's for sure. Stage wins in yellow jerseys came his way in the Tour de France by gambling. on long breaks. And we just heard Jack Bauer say, it's a gamble, it is a gamble. And they won't know whether it's going to work or not yet. Still 77 kilometres away. It's nudged out to 1:35. It's been over 2. It's been back to 1.
Well, if we're talking about gambling, the fact that he's got himself into the breakaway means he's actually playing a pretty good hand in this poker game.
Let's hope. Get his revenge on the Tour de France stage he lost to. It was the 15th day, if memory serves me right, back in the Commonwealth Games year of 2014. Jack did go on to win, by the way, a silver medal in the Commonwealth Games road race in 2014 in Glasgow, just after the Tour de France ended. Rear view here as we look through the legs of Jack Bauer, the Kiwi rider, on his new team, Quick Step Floors, standing by their own this year, no co-sponsors for Quick Step. It's been one of the long-serving teams of Belgian cycling and indeed World Tour cycling.
It was interesting what Jack Bauer was saying, Phil, about taking a gamble of getting into the breakaway. Well, one man who very rarely gambles is the team manager of this Ethics Quick Step team, or Quick Step Floors as it's now called, because that's Patrick Lefevre, and over the years he's always been able to pick out quality bike riders for his squad, and so he's not taken a gamble on Jack Bauer. He knows the qualities of this Kiwi rider.
Absolutely right. He's been a great manager, and he's been in charge of teams that have won all of the major races around the world as well. As you can see, there's no real urgency here. This is now has developed into a fast tempo by the peloton. They've pegged it at 1:35. They're not in any hurry to bring them back to the fold. Bauer taking on fluid, wise man. It's got quite warm all of a sudden on the course today. It was very, very average at the start of the day when the Bupa Challenge cyclists all potted away from Norwood, heading on the big lap. They're still coming in at the finishing line in their hundreds at the moment, but at least they're coming in.
Well, as we look at the Quick Step Floors team there, I've got a piece of useless information for you, Phil, because I actually rode my first international race 40 years ago in 1976, and riding for the Belgian squad on that occasion was a certain gentleman by the name of Patrick Lefevre. So I've known Patrick Lefevre for 40 years.
So that's why he's friendly too.
But that's not Patrick Lefevre, that's Rick van Sleek,
who always brings the team out to Australia, team manager. Well, he's very nice. He's even given Sink a drink as well. He's given all the lads a drink. Now that's a nice manager.
And of course, and his wife, of course, Crystal van Sleek, is the manager of a ladies team in Belgium as well. So they keep it pretty much in the family. Van Sleek was a very good six-day rider, by the way.
Still looks very fit. Cam Meyer, we'll just see how this breakaway goes. He won so well back in 2011.
So I was just listening into what the team manager was saying there, Phil, and he obviously thinks that this group's going to get caught, because I just overheard him say, I think the peloton is coming.
Yeah, the gap isn't growing quick enough, is it? At this stage of the race, he's got to be pushing out, and the peloton know exactly what they're doing. They've got it all pegged up at the moment. Richie Portes has kept his 20 seconds advantage intact over Gorka Izaguirre, who of course crashed inside that last 3 kilometers yesterday by about 80 to 100 meters. It was unlucky to crash, but it was lucky he fell where he did. If it had fell 80 meters behind him, he would have been outside 3 kilometers. He would have lost more than 7 minutes, and of course I doubt he'd have started the race today. So let's hope he can recover from that shunt now and get on with a big battle tomorrow. Just 15 minutes from Adelaide is Campbelltown, home to the Campbelltown Food Trail. Here you can experience a range of fine food and explore the areas of the history and of the culture. Find gems hidden in the back street of Campbelltown, or sample the produce from large and well-known retailers. From a third-generation cheese-making business to coffees from around the world, there is something to satisfy everyone's taste buds.
Just
Well,
looking
there's
at
the spectators coming through. I think we just had a time gap there, Paul.
Yeah, I think it's still hovering at 1:35. I was going to say, just looking at the coffees there, Phil, it was nice to see a coffee from Ethiopia, which I think will be quite happy for Garbu Gourmet, who is the Ethiopian rider taking part in this race. There's the injured man we keep talking about, number 135, though. Some serious plasters on his left arm and leg, and he's just going to have to nurse himself through this stage today and just hope he can come out and be competitive tomorrow when he goes onto the slopes of Wollonga Hill. And, well, we were talking about these the other day.
As a diver just popped up underneath the Black Swan, and he's decided not the place to be. He's gone down again.
You're going to have to tell me what that's called. In America, it's called an anhinga. In Africa, we call it the African darter, but I'm not sure what they call it.
Well, it's a darter. It is a darter, yeah. Australian darter in this case. We called it a diver, didn't I? It's a darter.
And the Black Swan.
And the Black Swan. So these are the three riders, and well, 135. Should we read anything in that? Because it's been 135 for ages. Gorka's number is 135. Must be some story there. I hope that Gorka Izagirre really pulled himself round today. He's become quite a challenger on day 2. This is the best seat in the house here. Don't even have to get up to take the photo. Look.
And it just goes to remind us, there he is once again, 135, how tough and unfair this sport can be sometimes, because both you and I, we talked about Team Movistar, but not once did we talk about Gorka Izagirre, whose brother Jon Izagirre is a very well established professional bike rider, but he was in this race in excellent form the way he was the last man standing when Richie Porte attacked on the climb up to Paracombe.
He was, and he remains the challenger. We'll see how he goes up the hill tomorrow. He ran up the back at very high speed as the rider Restrepo, coming backwards so quick on Team Katusha, wiped him out, and Restrepo's bike locked up with Gorka's bike.
Wearing number 2 there is a man who I think will come out to play tomorrow, Esteban Chavez. He was on the podium in 2 Grand Tours last year, Phil. I mean, it's amazing to think he was second overall in the Giro d'Italia, and then he was 3rd overall in the Vuelta a España. And a nice little story about him, by the way. The team, Orica Scott, actually brought his mum and dad over towards the end of the Giro d'Italia so they could be with him, because he was wearing the pink jersey. He lost the pink jersey towards the end, and he lost it to Vincenzo Nibali. And the first people to go across and congratulate Vincenzo Nibali on his victory were the parents of Esteban Chavez.
Yeah, well, it's a lovely family, and we interviewed him the other day for a private function. One of the nicest persons I think I've met in the sport, and he had us all in fits of laughter. He got a good command of the English language too. 1.5 minutes just hovering, going nowhere, I'm afraid. These long straight roads, at least they're out of sight on these stretches of long straight roads. We're heading up towards the top end of the course at Williamstown, and then we'll start to swing back on our journey south. And it really is all downhill to the finish, and that is where it's going to be absolutely crucial to pay attention at the front. Let's just check in on the race so far today. Rollout came from Norwood Parade. Peter Sagan, the world champion, on display, along with the ochre jersey of Richie Porte from Tasmania. And we know all the Tasmanians are sitting on the edges of their seat. He's very popular back home. Rollout time as we headed out to the race start. Once we were out on the race start, they got off to a cracking start. Number of attacks before these three started to establish a lead.
A lot of riders actually quite concerned about the start, because it was uphill for about the first 8 kilometres along the first of these narrow gorges, but eventually, once the breakaway started to get established, they pulled away to 1.5 minutes lead, and they were well in the lead when they came to the first King of the Mountains, only King of the Mountains point at Chequer Hill Road.
At Chequer Hill, it was where Sink decided he wanted the points. The mountain biker feeling more at home now. He's going uphill. A massive crowd. No one's surprised about this. There's always a big crowd when they include Chequer Hill on this climb. He got the points, but sadly, as far as we know, we haven't had it totally confirmed, there were no points for Thomas de Gent, so he's still equal first with Richie Porte in that competition. Onward we went to Birdwood, and for the second day running there was no sprint at the III Net Sprint, because they simply just carried on pushing home their advantage. Just a hop, skip and a jump away to the break.
And the break, 1 minute and 35 seconds, never really given too much of an advantage. The main field keeping the tempo, under the control of Team BMC, the team of the overall leader, Richie Port.
Turning now to the live pictures again. There's no change. The peloton are all together. Nobody reported to be behind. We say it now, but earlier on when they made that fast start, there was at least 6 riders, some of the big names, did lose contact with the peloton. So not all the legs are firing at the moment in this bunch. So gap represents 1.2 kilometers, and are joining us now Robbie McEwen, hot-footed from the outside tribunes. Robbie, you spoke to Jack Bauer off camera this morning, didn't you?
I did. When I was just leaving the start, the interviews were all done. I had to go back through the riders that were assembling at the start line, and I bumped into Jack. And we'd seen each other last week in New Zealand. I'd seen his riding quite well, and I said, this is your real opportunity in this race, isn't it? He said, it's the only one as far as I'm concerned, so I'm going to have a go.
And there he is, riding no-handed, just straightening out his racing track mitts. And he must still be a little bit confused, but it's nudging away, heading up to 2 minutes again. What do you think, Robbie?
Depends on what the bunch want to do. Depends what the bunch want to do. I mean, sync is the real problem. At 57 seconds in the overall classification, BMC will be under instruction to not let it get out of hand. And I was quite surprised that now they've let it go back out to 150. But it's a matter of holding it the right sort of gap, because they don't want anyone trying to jump across, because then they'll have a real race on their hands. A pity for a guy like Cam Meyer. He's picked this really well. He's 3 minutes and 9 seconds down in the overall GC, but he's got a guy at less than a minute, so he'll be out there thinking, it's not the guy I need with me. I wish he'd just go away.
And that's a difficult thing. We talked just a little bit earlier on. Everybody in the main field knows Cam Meyer and his capabilities. They know Jack Bauer because he's been around for an awful long time as a professional bike rider. But Andre Schink, that they've heard the stories that he's been a mountain biker. He's been pretty impressive because he rode into the breakaway on the second stage, and he still finished inside the top 30. So he's an enigma, a question mark.
You've got to watch out for those mountain bikers. We've learnt that. Guys like Fuglsang, Hesjedal. There's another one, an Aussie one.
An Aussie one. McEwen?
No, it was BMX, mate. I think we're thinking about and Adam Hansen.
So, yeah, they've really got big motors.
Even Peter Sagan himself. Yeah. Well, we saw the relationship there, 1.2 kilometre gap between the peloton and the breakaway. They just got around that top end corner, so they'll still be out of sight of the group here. Thomas Kent riding front right in his blue spotted leader's jersey in the Subaru King of the Mountains. Although it's on loan from Richie Port, they're locked together on points just now.
I just keep looking at the way that the Movistar riders are performing there in the dark blue jerseys with the M on the back. There, number 135, Robert. That was a very dramatic crash. It's not as if he slipped. He went down and hurt himself yesterday, but he's had to warm the body up over this first 2 hours of the race.
If there's any silver lining to that very dark cloud of Izagirre's heavy crash, is that today is not a terribly difficult stage. He should be able to defend himself fairly well. The injuries, I don't think, will affect him. He should have no trouble in keeping up with the peloton. Tomorrow, on the other hand, up Willunga, he's landed on his back. All his rib cage will be extremely tight. I'm sure his back is out. He's going to have a lot of difficulty, but shows the importance of this race and the importance of World Tour points that he stayed in the race.
And you know as well as I do, when you get injuries like that, that maybe the problem is not just the pain. It's not being able to sleep properly at night. Every time you roll over, ouch.
You don't sleep properly, you don't recover well, and your body is working so hard to try and start to regenerate itself and heal those wounds. You just don't recover from the racing effort that you've made, so it's a double-double. I have not heard a didgeridoo played like that before.
It's a new method, new technique.
But he's right, he's cheering on the white jersey of Cam Meyer there, Uni SA, because these youngsters are still leading this race on the team prize by 4 seconds to the nearest team, and they're taking on all of the World Tour squads.
And you have to take your hat off again to Mike Turter and the organisation here, because they actually took on the international governing body when they put this race together to say we have to have a national team, especially when it went to the World Tour circuit. They said we have to have a national team, we have to have Team Uni SA in here, and it's a platform, it's a stage for these guys, these youngsters, to come and show themselves off.
It is such a fantastic opportunity, and although I understand they can't do it at every World Tour race, Tour Down Under is a little bit special.
bit smaller field. There's only 7 riders per team as well, so it makes room for another team on the road. But all the riders that get a start in the Uni SE team, they really fight hard for that selection. And they're also very proud to pull on that jersey because it's got such a great history in this race. Patrick Jonker won overall. They've had so many stage winners like Jack Bobridge 2 years ago. And the peloton haven't forgotten that either. That's what makes this difficult today for the break.
I think Caleb Ewan came into his first taste of the Santos Tour Down Under with that jersey as well.
Rowan Dennis.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, so many. I've tried to name one that didn't.
As they pass through to the big teams, yeah. No, these are real talents. This is not a thrown together team. They watch carefully the results of the national championships, and they usually save one place for somebody from the national championships, and then they get their riders, and they always perform. Michael Storer at the moment is the best placed of the team. Now this boy came up Paracombe, shocked himself, and we're just waiting now if he confirms the way he's riding on Wollonga Hill tomorrow. There's no reason at all why he couldn't be a podium finisher on Sunday.
And he's very confident too. He said, I'm actually looking forward to Wollonga more than I was to Paracombe up Mount Torrens Hill. He thought the longer climb would suit him better, but he's pleasantly surprised. But I think deep down inside, he's thinking to himself, I knew I had that in me. Very confident young man, but great attitude. And they've got the guys in the team with them to lend their experience, like Cameron Meyer, a former winner of this race, a rider at World Tour level. Also Nathan Earl, a former Sky Team rider. So young guns surrounded by experienced head, and of course with Brad McKee in the car.
I mean, you've been there, Robbie, many times before. What's it like? I mean, when you look at a guy like Brad McGee and you say you've got your childhood images of him winning the prologue of the Tour de France below the Eiffel Tower, yellow jersey. Whoa, that's an inspiration.
It is, and I think for young guys that make this selection and come through and have a director, the likes of Brad McGee, if he says something, I'm sure they just sit there and nod.
So, boys in red, most confusing colour in the peloton this year, and it's BMC primarily on the front at the moment. Far left we've got Lotto Soudal. Another team which in red is the Trek team, and the Bahrain Merida squad also in red.
I think they might have to come up with a new UCI regulation concerning team uniforms and only a certain number of teams being able to wear the right colours, because it does make it very difficult, even for the guys riding in those teams. Sometimes you're at maximum heart rate, you're looking around trying to identify your team leader or your sprinter, and then there's a sea of red behind you. You don't know which guy is yours.
That's a very good point, Rob. I never even thought of that. I was only being very selfish and thinking of the commentators. Through the Powerade hydration station at the moment. This is where the riders can take on food as well as drinks, as they're just riding through. They're not chasing this breakdown, but they do feel that they have it exactly where they want it before we start the journey back. We're heading now, the hydration station here is around Springton before we go through.
I think we've got to the point now where the peloton know they can pull these guys back whenever they want to. It would have been a little bit more of a concern if they'd start to see this gap to get to 3, 4, 5 minutes. You'd see a lot more nervous attitude in the peloton. But going through the hydration station with about an hour and a half of racing to go, the power of the main field knows they can wipe this breakaway out.
They do, but I'm also expecting quite a tactical battle. Just looking at the guys there, their experience, Cameron Meyer, Jack Bauer. Look at the body language, not just here in the feed, but over the last few kilometres. They're not really fighting against it. So they're going to wait for the moment, go for home and try and maintain that gap. Still steal it.
So we've made the turn now as we head back, and it's all downhill towards the finish. BMC just containing the peloton here, and it hovers at around 1.5 minutes. Nobody in any hurry. Richie Porte will be delighted with the way it's going just now. But the opportunists really, I would have thought, might want to do something about this. They're playing into the hands of the strong teams if they just meander over the Adelaide Hills, which is what they're doing just at this minute in time.
Well, BMC tactically are a very astute team. They've got Alan Piper in the car, a former Tour de France rider for Australia. He knows exactly how to play out the plans, and they will try and make sure that Team BMC on the front in the red and black jerseys can keep that gap between 1 and 1.5 minutes. And then I think this year it seems to be a lot more complicated because there's so many teams have brought good finishers along, and that's why I think it even though this is the stage as far as I'm concerned for a breakaway to succeed, it's a lot more difficult for a breakaway to succeed in the makeup of this year's Santos Tour Down Under.
We do have a lot of good sprinters here. Of course, Caleb Ewan has dominated. Peter Sagan is getting better by the day. But you look through the field and you see guys like Danny Van Poppel already been close. And like yesterday, Bonifacio, he was up there in third. And there's a whole host of others. Ben Swift has not been able to have a real go at the finish yet. Mark Renshaw, I spoke to him this morning. He said, you know, the problem is this year, the Worlds were so late last year. You need to have your off-season. I had a month break. So you can only get back into it when the program allows, and then suddenly it's January again. You can't go flat out all year. And if he tried to do that, shorten his off-season, train up for Tour Down Under, be at his peak, well, he's probably going to end up letting Mark Cavendish down as lead-out man at some of the grand tours later in the season. So it was an interesting one with the change of the Worlds date. It has affected quite a few riders lead into this new season.
You talked about the Worlds there, Robbie, and they've only ever been in the Southern Hemisphere once before, and that was in Australia area. That was in Geelong back in 2010. Well, South Australia want the Worlds here now. They could find some great World Championship courses around these hills, and if they got them, of course, the earliest they could come would be 2020, I think.
And it'd be a great idea. Then you could even have it late and all the riders could just stay here and ride Tour Down Under in 2021.
Well, we're looking on the long straight roads here at the moment, and quite exposed just now. There is a wind blowing out there. It's not a tragic one, but it's making for tough going here. Might be what's deterring the peloton shutting this down just at the minute in time. All the BMC boys having to carry the rest of the race just now. So just panning right down the line. 129 cyclists in that peloton at the moment. 65 kilometers to go. Now, I did say that it's all downhill from here. Well, quite clearly it's not quite all downhill, but we are getting to the high spots of the course, and we will gradually lose height and finish with a sweeper right down to the finish. Three riders down below. We're pulling back the relationship. The riders would freak if they saw this, but we get the... There they are. They've got them in sight now.
Yeah, but just look at the trees over on the right-hand side. That gives you an indication of how much the wind is buffeting these riders. They've got a sprint point coming up in a few kilometres' time as well, after 91 kilometres into the race, and that's when they go through the beautiful little town of Mount Pleasant. Now, I wonder whether or not they want to pull that breakaway group of three back before they get there, or if Team BMC are quite happy to say, no, Richie Port doesn't want to go for any of these intermediate sprints. We'll leave those three out, and then we'll start to pull them back in once we've gone through Mount Pleasant.
Yeah, I think you're right, Paul. There's no interest from the GC riders to go for those intermediate sprints. And I was saying before, I really believe that especially Bauer and Cam Meyer, they are just doing what the peloton will let them do at the moment. They're not fighting against it. The peloton don't want to catch them yet. So Bauer and Meyer are sort of just hovering, staying around that minute and a half. I'm sure there's going to come a time where they suddenly go as hard as they can and race for the top of that gorge as if it's a finish line. Because if they get in there, they're a chance.
Well, just how good is that Wes cam we use on the helicopter? You'd think we were filming from a motorbike right now alongside the riders, but we're not. We're flying above the power cables, and there he is, waiting for the riders to go by. Let's have a look. Oh, our motorbike camera's just as good. They're all up for it.
Talk about an eye in the sky. I mean, it's quite amazing the technological advances in the coverage of cycle racing these days. I mean, you can almost, from the helicopter, get into the rider's back pocket.
And now where they're able to carry GoPro cameras on board, on the handlebars, under the seat, and the footage that's been bringing to us, like yesterday's fall. And we don't want to see a crash, but when you when it happens, and then you get to see how it happened and how riders avoided it, who else went down, it gives you shivers down your spine. And watching Peter Sagan, centre of the picture, Izagirre from Movistar clips the wheel. Sagan just throws his weight to the left.
The skill of that guy, he avoided a real heavy fall. Richie Porte wasn't far away from it either. There's another view of it. They really went down at probably 50, 60 kilometres an hour at that point.
This is the onboard bike camera there. You can just see the crash happening over on the left-hand side. And I tell you what, this was when the pressure was on, because it was just inside the final 3 kilometres. That's Wiese in the red and black jersey. Just have a look at it one more time and just watch the way Peter Sagan picks his way around that. Just as you said, Robbie, a little flick of the hip.
That's exactly what he's done. And I asked him this morning, I said, a bit of technique? He said, nah, instinct, just trying to save my own life. I was very lucky, but less lucky was Izagirre, and we saw him come in yesterday. What you don't see is under the jersey, all these ribs of his upper back on the left-hand side. Oh. It'd like he'd fallen across a cheese grater.
Gosh, no, they're brave men. They're made of rubber, I'm sure of that.
Talk about
and
gladiators.
Back in the action again today, exactly.
And as Robbie said, it is so important. Gorka Izagirre came here with great form, and you can throw it away in the blink of an eye, as he did there, and it was just one slight mistake, and it wasn't even his fault. It was somebody in front of him, but everyone is so tightly packed together. Sometimes there is just nowhere to go.
Sometimes your number just comes up, or down, as it were.
Yeah. But at least he's still there with a chance of finishing on the podium on Sunday. He hasn't lost any time. 4 kilometres before we get down to Mount Pleasant, and 91 kilometres into the stage will be completed then. These boys seem to be doing all they can to help each other. They know what's going on. They're riding in a difficult wind today. They haven't pulled away from the field. The field are content. They don't want to have a mass sprint for even a 3-second time bonus, which is what is on offer in Mount Pleasant, because it could be won by people that could affect the overall in the next couple of days. So they'll try and keep those guys out front for now.
But again, on the descent down the gorge road here, I think we'll see a lot of control coming from BMC, not necessarily to chase the breakaway group down, but to make sure they keep Richie Porte in a safe position in the main field. But just looking there at the BMC riders sitting in 4th position, Richie Porte. I mean, you've known Richie for quite some time. I just get the feeling this year there's that little added extra confidence that he seems to have found from somewhere.
I think even though he finished 5th at the Tour de France, which wasn't what he desired, but he put everything together like we did and said, well, he should have finished 2nd without that puncture. He's gained great confidence because there are a couple of other issues he had. He had a fall, then he had a wheel change after the fall. On that second last day, the last mountain stage where Bardet won to the Mont Blanc, Richie Porte's wheel was rubbing on his frame all the way up the climb, which is why he was unable to attack. He said, but I had to decide what to do. Try and straighten it, probably not get back on, or just go with it. So he's ridden up like that. So all these things have given him an enormous amount of confidence in his own ability, and he's got enormous confidence in his team because they know what they're doing out here.
They do, and there'll be no complications this July because they're the rider who he brought the team for to be the wingman for TJ Van Garderen will not ride the Tour de France. He'll ride the Giro.
And I was talking to Alan Piper, one of the management team from Team BMC, and he was actually saying the same thing last year, that it's the first time really in Richie Porte's career that a team has had 100% confidence in supporting him.
And I think it's the right decision to make. They've given TJ Van Garderen a couple of chances to ride for GC at the Tour and be co-leader along with Richie Porte. TJ Van Garderen, as good a rider as he is, he's an extremely good rider, a guy capable of winning Tour of California, riding high overall in the Grand Tour if everything goes well. I think he's just not quite naturally built for it, that he hits a wall about 2 weeks in, and it's happened a few times.
Second rest day, usually.
Always the day after the second rest day.
I didn't get that far before I got tired.
No, you were tired after 2 days.
I was tired just getting there.
Well, we've done 90 kilometres of the race so far. That's around about 55 miles of racing, 62 kilometres to go to the finish. That's around about 40 miles, and it's going to take these guys around about an hour and a half to get to the finish. 2 kilometres to go to the next sprint point.
It'd be quicker than that, Paul, that long downhill.
Yeah.
the IONet sprint 2k away, and then I think we might see them start to think about bringing these 3 riders back into the fold today. 2 hours 23 now. They've been in the saddle since they rolled away from Norwood Parade. The thing is that Sink here, only 57 seconds off, ignored the chance to gain 3 seconds at Birdwood. Let's see if he ignores the chance to get 3 seconds bonus at Mount Pleasant, because it could all help him.
Just having a quick look at the different pedalling styles here as well, Robbie. You see Jack Bauer using a massive gear. When you get a chance to have a quick look at the rider in the breakaway with him, Andre Sink, the man who comes from the mountain bike background, he's using a much lower cadence.
Looks like Jack Bauer's riding about the 53.15 there, which is quite a big gear. See him just rolling it over there, not looking like he's forcing himself, not rolling through the hips, not rolling through the shoulders. Fairly comfortable. But Sink there, that mountain bike style cadence, really much higher cadence, and Cam Meyer smooth as silk.
Well, you just get that from having a background on the track, and it is amazing. Those riders who've been in the team pursuit, ridden on the track, they just get that different pedalling style.
You see, it's about 2 cogs difference between Meyer and what Jack Bauer was riding on the front. And Andre Sink, he's even another cog lower, higher up the block, but lower gear than Cam Meyer. So a really nice cadence he's holding there. He's thinking 61k to go. I reckon in 35 kilometres they'll be thinking that's a bit of a finish line. They'll turn out of Lobethal, they climb up for a couple of k, and that's where the road first starts to dive down towards Cuddly Creek. They can get to there with a minute. They're still going to take a lot of catching, these guys.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. If they could get to around about Cuddly Creek with a minute and a half, then it starts to become game on for that leading group of riders, because we do know the 2 of them, Cam Meyer and Jack Bauer, that they've got the firepower to really rip it down this descent.
They've also got some racing form in their legs. Cam Meyer was extremely strong at the Australian National Championships in Ballarat just a bit over a week ago, nearly 2 weeks ago. Jack Bauer rode the New Zealand National Championships and he was strong there.
He was. He won the National Time Trial Championships.
But they really need to get rid of Sink.
Yeah, he's the big problem. But they're not going to get rid of him, because he's sort of shown us already in this race the form that he's got, because he was with most of the contenders at the top of the climb up to Paraco.
Here we are, we're in Mount Pleasant now, just 400 metres from the sprint, and I don't think these boys are going to race for it at all. Cam Meyer is pulling them through. Jack Bauer from New Zealand, 2nd place. The Czech Republic's rider Sink finished up with only a 1 second sprint bonus in the last sprint as well. Moved up 1 place overall as a result of that now. And I don't think they're going to contest it. They're thinking long term. They're thinking the seconds aren't worth going for as far as they are concerned. The points as well in the IINet's red jersey competition, which is currently being led by Caleb Ewan, and is certainly not endangering his lead either at the minute. So they're through the point of 90.1 kilometres. The last 20 kilometres of the race today is a high-speed chase all the way to the finishing line. Long straight road of Mount Pleasant, bathed in warm sunshine now. We got it. If you were watching our coverage yesterday, we told you about the storm that we hoped wasn't going to reach the race, and eventually it did go around us in the Southern Ocean down at Victor Harbour. But it came, believe me, it hit town about 5 hours later, and it did a lot of damage in Adelaide itself. Trees were down, cars were crushed. Thank heavens it didn't hit the race at the time.
Yeah, we're very lucky, and but as again, when you look at the positive side of a big rainstorm like that coming in last night, Phil, I don't think in the last few years I've quite seen South Australia quite as green and lush as it has been this year.
Yeah, that's the plus side for sure. Brad McGee in the car there, thinking of Cam Meyer.
The other big advantage for Team UniSA is that a lot of the riders on that squad have come through the Australian Institute for Sport. They trained on these roads, they know the roads, and they know what the descent is going to be like. So it's a big psychological advantage to know what part of the next 60 kilometres is going to hurt the most, but also what part of the course where you can recover.
Brad McGee showing Cam Mai exactly where he is. Brad McGee, I think I'm right in saying, was the first Australian to lead all 3 Grand Tours: Spain, Italy and France. Very, very good bike rider in his time.
Well, the reason he was going to the map there, Robbie, was he was just showing where we'd turned. We've come to the far end of this out and back. So he was explaining the difference in the way that the wind was going to change and affect the advantage of the breakaway.
Yeah, Cam might have had a throwaway comment then of, oh, when are we going to turn out of this headwind? Oh, well, actually, Brad McGee is a perfectionist and everything down to the details. But I always find it really interesting to see how these battles play out between a breakaway and the bunch. They've realised they're not going to get given more than a minute and a half. You see on their body language, they're not riding as hard as they can. They're not trying to push it out any further. They're trying to let it stay at this gap for as long as possible till they get to a point and they think, now go, we can take them on.
Well, let's see. We're through Mount Pleasant. Cuddly Creek itself is where we actually start the descent, and the descent is 19 kilometres and the last kilometre slightly uphill. These 3 riders continuing. Bahrain on the front and riding pretty strongly, these 3, but not being silly. They know that they're probably going to get caught anyway.
Adelaide, South Australia. This is the Santos Tour Down Under, and there is Johnny Stephenson. He rode the Bupa Challenge today, as did thousands and thousands of people showing the guns there. We have a huge crowd here in Campbelltown. So many people who have participated this morning, friends and family that watched them go across the line. It's a really great day for those that just love to get out and have a cycle and test themselves with what our professionals do. So there they all are. They're still coming across the line even as we speak over our left-hand shoulder here. You can see them coming in here. There's a whole heap of hobby cyclists, weekend warriors, A-graders, cyclists of all levels who are watching the big screen also as we see our breakaway, and it's an interesting stage, this one. They hold a minute 32 from the peloton, Cameron Meyer and Bauer and Sink. Now John Stephenson, as we saw him just before, did the Bupa Challenge, and his fan cam is always good. Let's take a look.
The Bupa Challenge is one of the highlights of the Santos Tour Down Under, and this year the event is sold out. Taking on the ride again this year is one of the greats of cycling, Mr. Jens Voigt.
Just can't get better than this.
So Jens, what brings you back to do the Bupa Challenge?
We had a fantastic experience last year. It's all for a great cause, and it's just the camaraderie and the friendship. You know, these riders show to each other support you see on the road. It's just a fantastic experience to be out on road with like 5,000 plus people with the same goal, trying to help people that are less fortunate than us.
The Bupa Challenge begins on the streets of Norwood with 5 distances to suit all riders' abilities and fitness levels. These lucky people are part of Jens' riding group and will join the legend on the ride to Campbelltown. Part of tonight's meet and greet has Jens passing on his knowledge.
First rest stop. Yeah, come in. No, you not. The first one, the other 20 people me. No, but it's just this. I just don't want back and go to the whole thing. Hey, don't you know who I am?
I just retired, mate. So when you said in that your chat that when you retired you didn't want to touch any sort of fitness, welcome to my world, mate.
I guess that's what it is. When you had a good career, a long career, you finished and you go, you know, I don't want to suffer anymore so much. So I just do recreational rides. I even tell my kids when we go to school, kids, easy. Daddy's not a racehorse. Go easy on daddy. You know, so yeah, I take it fairly easy in life now.
The next time these riders will meet up will be at the parade in Norwood for a 6 a.m. start. And guess who will be there? Me. So I'm off to bed to get some rest. It's going to be a long day. Well, it's 6 a.m. You obviously love your riding. How good is this to be around?
We were here last year for the Jens ride. We had a great time.
How exciting is it to be able to ride with Jens?
So approachable, and he spoke to us along the way, so yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
it's awesome. He's an absolute legend, and you were there last night when him and Anna Mears, mate, to be in the same room with Anna Mears and Jens, absolutely loved it.
7,000 riders locked and loaded. I better jump in line so I don't miss the start. The ride takes us through the ironically named Paradise into Williamstown, then Mount Pleasant and Mount Torrens, ending in Campbelltown, and the scenery along the way is nothing but breathtaking. Well, that's the Booper Challenge done and dusted for another year. Another fantastic reason to come down Adelaide and take part in the Santos Tour Down Under.
And the Booper stage, of course, it's lightening up. We're going to get back to commentary in just a tick, but get all your information from the Tour Tracker about this race, about the athletes, where they're from. Jump on the website and have a look, and of course ask Robbie a question. It is as simple as getting onto Twitter, #AskRobbieTDU, and we'll endeavour to answer as many questions as we possibly can. It's at a very interesting stage, about 55k from the finish. This stage of the Santos Tour Down Under, it is Booper Stage 4, Norwood to Campbelltown, 149.5k. Remember, Richie Port is in the box seat. He has a 20-second lead. Let's get back to commentary.
Well, 55 kilometres out, Paul, an opportune attack. Sink was not paying attention. They've got rid of him, and now these two are very strong riders.
Well, Robbie was just talking a little while ago about the attitude and the pedalling style of the riders. When you look at the style, you can see it's changed. And now this is the move from third position. Cam Meyer, very astute to keeping an eye on the rider from the Czech Republic, and Jack Bauer responding immediately. And I'm a little surprised. Maybe that's the fact that he's a young bike rider.
Maybe he was just getting tired and they sensed it. As they come up to each other, they decided to talk. Where's the other one gone? He's gone. Just the two of us, right? Yes. Let's go.
Well, the man they had to offload was Sink, and a very telltale sign. As soon as Cam Meyer went, Sink looked over his right shoulder. No one else there, mate. Just cars. So he's pretty much done his dash. Cam Meyer still would, I think, prefer to be alone. 3 minutes 9 behind in the overall GC. Jack Bauer just a minute 32, if I'm not mistaken. Still not quite enough to be let that gap really open up. But this is the moment. This is where Cam Meyer, there'll be no more let up, and he's got a great companion in Jack Bauer, the New Zealand time trial champion. So a man in form.
I was going to say, do you think that really, that mistake was inexperience? Let's not forget, for Sink, this is his first proper road race. And I mean, he's at the top level of the sport.
A little bit of inexperience, but also his first race of the season. Your very first race as a stage race, you get into day 4, you are starting to get fatigued. He's been out there with two strong guys. So these two guys got more racing in the legs, more race form. We're also starting to see now counter-attacks coming from the peloton.
Well, that little attack got going about 2 or 3 kilometres ago, but I honestly thought they'd been caught and brought back. I think one of them is Paolo Tiralongo in there. We'll have a look at those as soon as we can get a camera down towards them, but these are the two boys trying to push on. The gap is holding at 1:32. Well, South Australia was named Australia's best event state for the 2nd year running, and it's easy to see why. It plays host to the Adelaide Fringe, which is the largest open access festival in the Southern Hemisphere. Then there's a cacophony of sounds from around the world that is Womadelaide, which features song, dance and stories from around the globe. Not to mention Tasting Australia, which allows you to take a journey through the state's sprawling culinary landscape during 8 days of gourmet delights. Autumn, winter, spring or summer, there's always fun to be had with an endless array of world-class festivities just waiting to be experienced. These boys are racing on towards the end of another long day in the saddle. Day 4 of the Santos Tour Down Under. Setting the pace, as always, Team BMC protecting their Queen Bee from Tasmania. And that is Richie Port. Pace being set by Daniel Ovis, one of the riders involved in that huge prang yesterday. And not a mark on his body. He fell on top of Jan Bakelants.
This is what the profile looks like. We're heading off into the distance there. The riders moved away from Mount Pleasant. Next it's Mount Torrens and then Lobethal, and then they've got a slight little final climb, if you like, away from Lobethal, and then it's pretty much all downhill to the finish. Now this is the counter move that's started to get across here. Wearing number 76 there is Will Clark, big strong rider in the lime green. The rider in the Astana jersey there, number 104, is Michael Valgren, very strong individual time trialist, and wearing number 62 is Lars Bak, another strong man. Now this is a serious move.
This is a very strong group, and BMC will not want to let this get too far away. I'm sure Alan Piper, he'll be sitting there in the team car doing the maths, figuring out who is where on the overall classification. But I think Will Clark, Lars Bak would be a little bit further back in the general classification. Not sure about Valgren, but if they all come together at the front, if they can get across to Cam Meyer and Jack Bauer, they're a big chance. But BMC will not let it get out of hand, because Bauer's just at a minute and a half in the GC.
But that's kind of a false distance at the top as well, isn't it, Robbie, when you look at that 51 kilometres to go? Because for me, these guys are racing for 30 kilometres to go, because they realise that once they get to the 30 kilometre to go mark, then it's all downhill, and it's very, very difficult then to eat into the advantage of a breakaway group. The gap between the two leaders in the peloton is 1:32, but part way across the gap, not too far away, 30 seconds back to sync, but in the middle there we've still got those three chasers.
So those three chasers have 20 seconds on the peloton, 1:10 to Meyer and Jack Bauer, but they know if they can get out of Lobethal to that small climb up out of town, they start the very fast descent, and it's an 85 kilometre an hour downhill into Cuddly Creek, and that brings them onto the Gorge Road. Get there with a minute, they're a massive chance. We saw the Jack Bobridge, Lou Estra and Luke Durbridge group 2 years ago with less than a minute. They had 40 seconds all the way down the gorge, and they hung on to the finish. This is a very serious group, and going to have to start looking up where they are on GC, see what their chances are of being let go a little bit by BMC. But you see the pace is a lot hotter in the peloton now.
I think it would be good for the peloton if these three did get across this gap. There'd be 5 extremely strong bike riders, big quality bike riders. Will Clark, they call him the horse. He was in the first move of the day, and then they were caught, and next report was he was off the back of the peloton with a group of riders, but he obviously has recovered.
Yes, but also Team BMC have seen this as a very critical 20 kilometres of this race until we get through Lobethal and start that charge down the gorge, and that's why the gap has plummeted from 1 minute 30 seconds to 1 minute 10. There's also the advantage for BMC, because halfway across the gap in these straights they can actually see the development of the race.
Well, Paul, looking at the positions in the overall classification of these riders have just made an attack. Lars Bak just at a minute 20 behind Richie Porte. Valgren at 1:31, about the same as Jack Bauer. They can't afford to let this group get too far up the road, and that's why you see that overall gap from our 2 leaders back to the peloton drop down to 1:10. So this 3-man attack, I think, is going to spell the end for Cam Meyer and Jack Bauer.
Yeah, well, that's a good time to take a few questions from the viewers. Steven Pietek says, does fear play into your head on steep and fast downhills like Gorge Road?
Got to be honest, it does a little bit. The closer to the finish that it is, maybe the less that gets in your head, because the adrenaline's starting to flow, getting ready for the finish, lining it up for the sprint. But definitely out on the road, you take less risks, you do think about what you're doing a bit more, leave a bit more room, you're not fighting for that position, and that comes down to just not wanting to fall off. Nobody wants that.
No, well, certainly, and that was a very good question for today's stage. Coming in from Sam Thomas, what's the worst crash that you ever had, Robbie?
I think, well, the worst injury came from a collision that I didn't actually crash in, but I broke my leg and damaged the tendon in my left knee. But I suppose the worst crash, the most spectacular, was hitting a parked car in a race in France back in 1997. Riding circuits, first lap through, roads all clear. Second lap through, suddenly a parked car around a bend, and myself, about 6 others, ploughed into it. And I don't remember much of it. I really just know it from a story because I was unconscious.
Yeah, well, that's one of the great reasons why the police here in South Australia do a fantastic job of nursing these riders around the state. Another question here from Robert Lewis from Sydney, I reckon. So there was a little bounce there. Sorry to avoid the question, but it looked as if Jack Bauer, Will Clark there was checking his tyre pressures. Cyclists in the breakaway, what do they do to keep themselves motivated during such superhuman efforts?
Just before we get to it, back rear wheel puncture for Will Clark. What do you do to keep motivated? Well, you go in with a plan of trying to get in the break, and the motivation is always to win the stage, so you never lose sight of that. And once you get out there, I mean, you've got to go on with it. Look, a bit silly if you get out there and then just float back to the peloton.
There you go.
So
Sorry,
there's
Rory.
the wheel from the Shimano neutral spares, so they will service Will Clark as quickly as possible. But this will spell the end for this group, I think.
Well, this is really bad luck. Will Clark, back wheel puncture, gets himself into the move, and I think there'll be absolutely no point in trying to go forward now. The peloton are in the backdrop of our picture there. Change is a little bit slow as well. It's a neutral service car, so the wheels won't be set up for Will's bike. He's away, but he may as well wait, I think. Would you agree?
Well, that's tough luck, you know. He looks over his shoulder, he said, well, that's it. I think he'll sit up and wait for the main fielder. But he was in an extremely good situation. He had the two leaders, the three chasers, almost spread evenly. And in fact, the latest time check we're getting to the main field, which gone back to 1 minute and 25.
Well, the race is really opening up now. We've got two leaders, two chasers, one in no man's land, and the peloton. The two leaders working well together, two very strong world-class cyclists now free to fly. Sink clearly had found the distance a bit too far, passed by the chasers, gone back to the peloton. Will Clark has had a flat tyre. That's power we didn't want to lose from the peloton. But Michael Valgren and Lars Bak, two Danes together now, trying to catch these two.
You can actually see the difference in the pedaling style of these two riders to the style that they were developing about 30 minutes ago. You can almost feel the power that Jack Bauer is thrusting into those pedal strokes as he goes down, and he realizes now's the moment when they've got to take the risk of holding on to as much of their advantage as possible. And as I've said a couple of times, Robbie, they've got in their mind, I mean, these guys they've been here for more than a week and they've ridden this road, and they probably will have been to check out where the descent really starts, and they'll know exactly where they've got to put their effort in up until.
Well, Cam Meyer knows the roads of Adelaide extremely well. Jack Bauer, when I spoke to him this morning, he said, I was here 2 years ago. I rode it when Jack Bobridge won the stage. So also know that run in and know what's required to try and stay in front. So two very experienced guys and know exactly what's coming. They've been able to push it back out to 125 now, but with reinforcements, well, trying to come across at least, the two Danes, just makes it a bit too dodgy for BMC, and they're just going to need to keep a real lid on both these groups.
Well, you can just see the cars around the corner there. So these guys are doing an excellent job getting across the gap. It's about 25 seconds now, but they're two strong riders. Lars Bak, Michael Valgren, who won last year the Tour of Denmark. He was a member of the big Tinkoff squad, which pulled out of the sport towards the end of the year. And this is a serious move by these two riders.
Two tandems trying to progress, two from the Antipodes, two from Denmark. They couldn't be farther apart in geographical situations, and the whole field massing behind them, and the spread 1 minute and 25.
If these two tandems get together, BMC are going to need some help.
Yeah.
The sprinters teams who want to win, they're going to have to come to the front and aid in the chase.
And you know these roads, you probably trained a lot on these circuits in your career as well, and once we get through Lobethal, they were going to start the plunge, and it's going to take a different type of skill to control the speeds as we race down towards the finish, and that left-hand turn with 1 kilometre to go. Well, concentration there now. Take a trip out of Adelaide any weekend and chances are you'll stumble across a farmer's market. The Wollonga Farmers Market was the first of its kind to be established in South Australia. Wander among the stalls and buy food harvested fresh from the land and brought directly to you. It's a place bustling with culinary activity, and its raw energy will no doubt reinvigorate your taste buds. Bit of raw energy required here right now, I think, Paul. We would like to see these two riders, his Valgren, get across to the two leaders, because if they could, 4 powerhouses.
Huge powerhouses if they all get together. Jack Bauer looking for 1:32 at the start of the day. Lars Bak in the red jersey, he was looking for 1:20. Michael Valgren in the Astana jersey looking for 1:31. But if the 4 riders get together, we are looking at a serious team time trial down to the finish. And I think, as Robbie's quite correctly said, Team BMC, I think, will be under a little bit of pressure to try and pull back these 4 strong men.
Oh, there's absolute quality in this breakaway. Lars Bak, he's a guy that most of the season he spends his time riding on the front of the peloton, pulling breakaways back in the service of Andre Greipel to set up the sprints. They've got Sean DeBee here doing the sprints for Lotto, but a bit unproven against the likes of Caleb Ewan, Peter Sagan, etc. And Lars Bak, I've been talking to him over the last couple of days. He said, I actually feel pretty good. My off-season, pre-season went very well, so I'd like to try something in this race. And he realised this is the big opportunity, but great quality. Just been looking up at Michael Valgren's palmarès, his list of results. 2nd in Amstel Gold last year.
Yeah.
No lucky second place getters in Amstel Gold.
And he won the Tour of Denmark as well towards the end of the year, so that is a serious quality group. Currently, they're not yet together. There's about 20 to 25 seconds separating them, and I just wonder if these guys look over their shoulders and see that there is reinforcements coming back, if they will have the tactical nous to sit up and wait for them.
I think it's got to that point in the race where Meyer and Bauer will just have to keep going and think to themselves, if they come across to us, if they make it, good. But we're just going to keep going at our pace. If they don't make it, this is it. They're going with everything they've got.
Well, the gap's also extending between the leaders of the race and the main field to 1.5 minutes. And I would think it's starting to get just a little bit critical for Team BMC. They would need to see some assistance. And yes, there's a change in the main field.
And I thought I saw from the helicopter rider from Bora Hansgrohe, and of course, as every day so far, Damien Howson from the Orica Scott team.
Yeah.
So going up to help BMC. So the chase has now started in earnest. And Caleb Ewan, Peter Sagan looking to go head-to-head again, as they have already a couple of times here in Adelaide.
That's exactly what they're doing now. They're going to have to chase down these riders. Well, Lars Bak was once voted the Danish Cyclist of the Year back in 2011, and he's twice finished 2nd in the Tour of Denmark, but he's never won it. The man he's trying to cross the gap with has won it, though, last year. I've noticed 1 or 2 Astana boys trying to get up amongst the chasers and break up the rhythm too. Zakharov just shot up the inside to try and slot in near the leaders. Discouraged them a little bit. 45 kilometres to go. Oh, we want to just squeeze around the corner and look, and the answer is I can't see anybody in front.
Well, Robbie, let's just put it into perspective a little bit, because we keep talking about the guys. If they get together, this is a serious breakaway group. They've still got to pull back 1.5 minutes on the overall leader, Richie Porte. But I think what's almost interesting is they don't have to. I mean, Richie Porte has still got Wollonga Hill, so maybe BMC did a great job in actually turning off the pace and forcing the other teams to come forward.
So as the race continues here, this is the chase time to bridge. And our viewers in Australia on Channel 9, we will rejoin the action very shortly, but there is some breaking news. As we look here now at the 2 leaders, 44 kilometres left to go. The last 20 plus are downhill at high speed. The last one is slightly uphill. Not going to take long to cover 44 kilometres.
Well, Lars Bak looking over his shoulder. He wants to try and ascertain what sort of a job they're doing here currently. Robbie, when we look at the 2 and 2 riders who've managed to get themselves into this position, do you think they're a real concern to Richie Porte in the long-term ability to win this race?
No, with Willunga still to come, they're not a really great concern. But at BMC, they always ride fairly conservatively because you've always got to think of the worst case scenario. So were they to draw level and then something was to happen to Richie Port, they will have lost the race by letting them go too far. So cycling managers back in the team cars tend to always err on the side of caution.
Well, these two are riding extremely well. Now they've got rid of Singh. The two behind are still 25 seconds back. The spread is 1:32 minutes to the peloton. We're hearing from Race Radio on the course. And in fact, they're all locked in.
Well, that's the negative thing for the two-man breakaway, Phil, because you've got the two-man breakaway. 500 meters further back, you've got two more riders, and a little bit further back, you've got the main peloton.
Here's the finishing line, and they're still on the right-hand side. Riders coming home from the Bupa ride. About 5,000 of them set off this morning, and they're still coming in. This is the advanced convoy now coming home. This is the crowd's lovely warm conditions now here at Campbelltown. Boy, well, they're making the sprint finish look a little bit slow here. Rob, you could probably win this one.
I think that's one of the great things about the Bupa Challenge ride. It gives so many thousands of people a great appreciation for the course and what the professional riders go through.
Yes.
Because they'll get in, they'll sit back, and they'll see the speed at which the peloton comes up this road and think, have they changed the road in the last hour since I finished? Because that's just not the same.
Absolutely right. Yeah, absolutely right. 41 kilometres are still to race. The spread is 92 seconds between the bunch and the two leaders. Shadows on the road. The sun is out. We're on a little bit of a drop here. There'll be plenty of drops coming up pretty shortly. These are the two chasers here. Valgren in the red, Valgren in the blue rather, and Lars back in the red, and not getting any closer just now. 92 seconds the spread. Wow. It's been like this for kilometre after kilometre between the leaders and the main pack. On fields they've got them exactly where they want them, but you can misjudge this descent.
They've also just got 15 kilometres to go before it really goes down and doesn't go up anymore. So that's that first psychological finish line, if you like, getting out of Lobethal, 15k from where they are now. Minute and a half, they shouldn't lose too much in the next 15 kilometres. There's still a chance.
And that's the problem, Robbie, really, when you think about once they start the descent, even the two-man breakaway group is going to do roughly the same average speed as the main peloton, and that is not going to be enough for the peloton to catch them back.
That's right. On a wide open road, the peloton is only limited by what they can do physically, but in this run into the finish, you're limited by what the road lets you do because of all the corners, how technical it is. So you don't get rolling as the big bunch behind. It's very hard to swap turns because it's always turning and winding. So that's what evens things out, even though these guys have been out the front for a long time. Well, Cam Meyer and Jack Bauer at least.
Into Mount Torrens for the race now. Getting ever closer to when we start the descents after Lobethal. Valgren showing quite a hefty turn on the pedals there. They're trying to catch these boys, but it just shows you how quick these two are going. Got good form. This had been a very determined move by Cam Meyer at the back. His ambition was to try and take a stage of this race. He chose today. Mind you, one has to say the same for Jack Bauer. He also chose this day to try for a stage. And there's still a real chance it could work. There we are, the flags of Australia. And they're not New Zealand, those flags, are they, Rob?
Absolutely not.
Just checking.
White stars instead of red ones.
Okay.
Look at the speed of the main field, though, Robbie, when you start to see these guys. But I think hats off to these two leaders. They have so far judged their effort to perfection. That they kept the gap a minute and a half, a minute and 50 seconds, because they knew as seasoned professionals at just what point the main peloton was going to accelerate, and they've done likewise. I mean, you can see the difference in the pedaling style to what it was about 30 kilometres ago.
It's like we said earlier, they're just waiting for that right moment, and it's turned out quite perfect, really, being able to offload Andre Sink as well as going at a moment where they think we can take this all the way to the finish. And they're two incredible time trialists.
Well, I'm still hoping those two can stay away to the end. Just looking down from the helicopter, you can visibly see how quick the peloton now are moving over the road. But we've still got 4 riders ahead in 2x2 formation. This is Lars Bak here, taking on some more water. But they're not getting any closer. The last check we got was 25 seconds. Pretty much what it is, I think.
That's again one of those tough things, isn't it, Robbie? You make the move at the right time, you get the gap over the main field, and then all of a sudden it stabilizes and you can't close down that last 200 to 300 meters.
It's one thing getting the gap, it's another then maintaining and then building it back out. And looking down the road there, still just open road in front of them, fresh air, but no sign of our 2 leaders. They bounced out of the peloton, but look at the rhythm being held here. Cameron Meyer, Jack Bauer in the wheel, huffing and puffing, getting that oxygen, so they're doing really full gas turns, a complete team's time trial. In a way, I do hope for Jack Bauer, that I think I said Bobridge, Jack Bauer, that he can stay away. Remember the stage in the Tour de France into Montpellier when he was with Martin Elmiger and they got caught within, well, he almost could have reached out and touched the line, and Alexander Kristoff ended up winning.
It was Nîmes, actually.
And he still finished. He still finished 8th on the stage.
Wow, yes, they've realised they're not crossing the void, and they've decided it's no point. Let's save our strength for the sprint, maybe. But it just shows you how quick those two have settled in once they got rid of Sink.
And it's a reference as well, because the 2 guys that have just set up Valgren and Bak, they have got big pedigrees on their shoulders. They're strong bike riders, and they've said, look, we were getting there, and then all of a sudden we were going no further. So you have to be sensible sometimes as a professional biker. You've got to be able to make a decision, not hang out in the rain.
They could have hung for a little bit longer, but they weren't getting any closer. Look at the speed of the peloton coming up to them now, but interestingly enough, the gap is still 1.5 minutes to Meyer and Bauer. Damien Howson on the front now, former under-23 world time trial champion. It's going to take fantastic time trialists to chase the 2 time trialists that are off the front.
Yes, and Sunweb pulling the riders up on the outside as well. That was Phil Bauhaus who was leading through with the charge there. Team Sky in the black colours. Now the sprinters are going to start to want to move. Once we start this very dangerous descent, all those with ambition must get to the front of the peloton, because a touch of wheels on the way down and that could be the end of the race this week for them. They know it.
Well, guys, we're seeing 150 being given as a time gap now. It's a very quick change from 1.5. It will depend on where our vehicles are carrying the GPS signals. But if that is indeed a gap of 1 minute 50, they are just 10 or so kilometres away from the start of the big descent as they come out of Lobethal. This is giving them a massive chance to stay away.
1.5 kilometre gap. I tell you what, if it is right, and I think it is, because that the other two realised they were losing ground to the breakaway, and that's why they waited. So those 2 boys up front, and if they do get to start the descent, we are going to see a dramatic chase down that gorge all the way. Remember, once we turn left to the finishing line, it's an awkward turn as well. It is exactly 1 kilometre to the finish.
Well, I was just thinking, I was saying before the start this morning that this was going to be a nail-biter, but looking at the gap at 2 minutes with the 2 riders we've got in the lead, that is a very doable chance for these riders, and they're really going to have to get it sorted out too. You can see the 2 leaders going around the corner, but usually when we pull back like that, that's an indication. I think we might have a false time gap there, because just around the corner there, I'm pretty sure I saw the cars behind the 2-man breakaway group, and that to me is looking like around about 45 seconds.
Yeah, and when I saw 150, I said let's wait for confirmation. Yep.
Yeah.
But I was getting excited then.
I was too. I'm all deflated now, Rob. But,
well, I'll tell you what, I'm not deflated, because it's going to be a rip-roaring descent once they go through Mount Torrens, Lobethal, and then once we start to see this descent, there's a couple of really tricky corners. If you go into them at the wrong angle, you'll exit the road.
You've got to be very careful down the gorge road. We have seen a number of crashes going down there, guys who don't know the road quite as well. Remember a couple of years ago, Tyler Farrar ended upside down against the cliff face. We've seen other guys, there's a particular left-hander that really goes back on itself down in the bottom of the gorge road. And look at the speed on a flat piece of road here. 50, actually, it's going false flat up, and they're holding above 50 kilometres an hour.
Yeah.
But they're being dragged back by the peloton.
Yes, but the telltale sign is they've pulled out the neutral service vehicle. I was just coming back to that Tyler Farrar thing. He smashed his bike. Didn't he have to borrow a bike and a pair of shoes from somebody at the side of the road to get to the finish?
He did. It had shades of Michael Rogers back in 2002 when he won on a borrowed bike back in Barossa Valley over Mengler's Hill. It was the same brand too. Correct brand of bike.
Now the and the air temperature is nice too, if you caught it there. 20 degrees Celsius is absolutely perfect for the fast descent down into town. The judges have just taken the decision to award both riders the most competitive riders of the day up front. Damien Howson driving hard at the front with a little bit of help from Bora, of course, because they've both got sprinters on their team, but they've got to get the two riders up front first. Miles Scottson easy to pick out in that white champions, national champions jersey as well. Wanyar always the workhorse for the red BMC boys, just in front of him there as they continue. Peter Stettner 176 moving up on the outside. Stettner was another one of the riders in trouble in the opening 10 kilometres of the day. Lost contact with the peloton, but he got back.
And there's Will Clark at the back of the peloton, puncturing out of that group with Buck and Vulgren. As we see Bauer and Meyer really pushing on. They may be getting dragged back, but they're going to put up a fight all the way in because they know they don't need much of a lead once they get out of Lobethal.
Well, it's when you work like this, Rob, you'd love to see the breakaway work because they've put in the back into this. They're two of the greatest exponents against the watch anyway, these two riders, the Aussie and Jack Bauer, the Kiwi. When you look how the fastest peloton is going, and they're holding them off just now, and if we can just start that descent and they can get into those big gears, they put the chain wheels on that can give them the big gears on the way down the mountain, you never know what happens. There's the board. Unfortunately, it seems to have whited out as far as I'm concerned. I couldn't read that on my screen. Still, as long as they could, Jack Bauer just checks it out. Nice view of the helicopter. We're above it, of course, hopefully.
Well, Phil, I'm thinking that's around 38 to 40 seconds as they round that bend where we just saw Bauer and Meyer go through. So it is slowly but steadily coming down as you see Damien Howson go back on the front now. And one of the Bora riders, I would assume it's either Mühlberger or Postelberger, one of the
yeah, it is.
teammates of Peter Sagan.
I'd go for Postelberger.
It's one of the burgers.
It's one of the burgers. We used to have a guy called Hamburger, you know.
Yeah, but he was Danish.
Yes, he was. Yeah, brought the bacon home. Well, we just made the turn there off the Onkaparinga Valley Road, heading towards Charleston just now, and very soon we'll be heading into Lobethal, and that will signal the long drop down to the finishing line. 32 kilometres or just 20 miles left to race. The peloton on a slight rise here. A little bit of a change of speed at the top. It looks like Luke Durbridge. And they've just announced that you can no longer feed your riders. In effect, you can't go and touch your riders anymore and pass them bottles. It's all down to them now. They will know that they're in the last 32 kilometres of the day. And it's the two teams with the big sprinters who are now setting the pace. And BMC will be happy enough with that just now. Orica, Scott are the boys on the front. Just behind are riders from the Bora Hansgrohe team, the team of Peter Sagan. I felt yesterday Sagan, I think he did about 60 yards more than anybody else in that last kilometre because he was ducking and diving around falling bodies, then chasing the wrong wheels, all in an effort to catch up with Caleb Ewan. And he actually did catch up with him just before the finish, and then Ewan kicked in with the final acceleration. But his form is coming.
Well, I think the indication of being in the right time as he was and avoiding crashes like that just goes to indicate that you are in good form. Because when you've got good form sneaking in, you seem to be able to put your wheel marks in the right place all of the time.
That's exactly right, Paul. When you're going well, it just happens the right way. You're just ahead of the split. You're just on the side of the crash. When you're not going quite so well, you get caught up in everything.
Race Radio just saying now that it's 45 seconds is the gap between these two and the main fielder. It's still, I think, because of the quality of these two riders, I would still give them a good 10 to 15% chance of staying clear, because we're just getting to the point now where we're about to pick up the downhill part of this gradient.
Yeah, they're just starting that uphill, so they're going through the city limits of Lobethal, if you could call it a city, town limits, and only about 4 or 5 kilometres away from starting that very fast descent.
45 seconds, it's being confirmed by the race at the moment as we come into Lobethal. And it's after Lobethal, it's all downhill except the last kilometre, and they're going to fly, really fly down this hill. We should get some spectacular pictures from the helicopter as they charge the way down towards the finishing line. The sprinters want their day. I'm not too sure they expected these boys to stay away for quite so long. Only quality bike riders could have held off this peloton over the last half an hour, and we've got 2 of them up front, one from New Zealand and one from Australia. Here we are in Lobethal.
It's a tough thing for any of the bike riders who've ridden around here, know that once you go into Lobethal, there's a nasty little drag for about 2.5 to 3 kilometres before you actually start the downhill part of the course, and that 45 seconds could quite easily get wiped away on this uphill part.
Yes, it really could, when you see that a team like Orica Scott has sent Luke Durbridge to the front as well to assist in the chase. That's one of those spots where they can really rip 10-15 seconds off them in just one section of 500-600 metres uphill. It's a really tough little drag out of town, so I think they're not quite going to have enough to defend, but they will get onto the Gorge Road.
So as the field go through Lobethal, we're not too far away from starting the final plunge down to the finishing line. Little bit of a false rise in the town. This is a lovely little town, Lobethal. It's often the turning point for the club cyclists when they come out of Adelaide, and they get the benefit of all that lovely downhill session back into town.
The difference as well is when you think about the breakaway riders, the 2 riders who've been leading this race since very early on, they will slow down a fraction. Just having a quick look here.
Where's Maya gone?
Not sure.
I think he's jumped the wrong way. He's gone behind. Oh,
no, he sat up.
He sat up. Now has he got a problem? Why has he just sat up?
Well, I did notice when they turned into that main street in Lobethal, you would have noticed Cam Meyer out of the saddle, really trying to close the gap back down to Jack Bauer. I don't know if he distanced him through the corner itself, or Cam Meyer maybe has some sort of problem to make him lose the wheel. Jack Bauer now completely alone. Makes it a lot tougher ask to hold off the peloton. 45 seconds still. They're coming so fast now.
Well, there's the catch on the left hand. He's gone back into the pack. When he saw that board that said 45 seconds, it seems he decided it's not enough, and he's thrown the towel in, Cam Meyer here, and hoping he can stay with the peloton now and not lose any time on the day.
Just notice him looking down at his bike a little bit as he's changing gears coming out of that corner. He's not sort of swinging back into the bunch. He's just checking out his bike. I wonder if he's had some sort of mechanical issue that stopped him keeping up with Jack Bauer.
Well, there's nothing coming through Race Radio at the moment on exactly what happened, but it's quite clear that Jack Bauer now on his own, he'll be able to ride 110%. He's not got to hold anything back for the sprint, but I still think that this little gradient that we'll start to hit before we start the descent in earnest might go against him, because he will slow down his average speed by a couple of kilometres an hour, whereas in the main field you've got so many guys ready to come to the front, keep the high speed going, that he will lose a little bit of his 45 seconds.
Yeah, we talk about the Gorge Road making it possible to stay away with a small group. You really do need that assistance of a small group to ride like a team's time trial. One man alone, 45 seconds. I don't think it's even that. And look at the pressure going on, lining out at the back of the field. All these riders sitting in the wheel all day are already struggling. And there's a bit of a hand sling from one Astana to another. Must be their general classification hope. Move him up the bunch, get him back in position. As Luke Durbridge is the one winding up the pace.
Yes, Turbo Durbo and his teammate Damien Howson, they're the two pacemakers for Orica Scott. The Movistar team are on the right of our picture here as we look. They're looking after the injured Gorka Izagira, but he's still there despite all of the bandages overnight. And this is Valgren here, and I think he's losing ground. Not sure where he is just now.
He's the man that just gave that hand sling to his teammates. So Valgren had a go, used all his energy.
Yeah.
Now taking himself out the back as one of the Lotto riders, number 66, and that is Sean DeBee, the sprinter from the Lotto team. Look like he's just coming back from the team cars.
Yeah, Valgren, if he can just get up this little rise here and join in with the fun and games on the descent, because it's not very far away now. South Australia is quickly establishing itself as one of the best cycling holiday destinations in the country, as Adelaide's a free city bikes for sightseeing around town. The wine country's old rail lines that have been converted into cycleways, and coastal bike paths that cruise past white sandy beaches, as well as outback odysseys all waiting to be explored. And each year the Santos Tour Down Under offers the most enthusiastic rides many ways to get involved with the Bupa Challenge Tour and the Bupa Mini Tour for kids. So get on your bike and get adventuring in South Australia. The beauty of the Adelaide Hills here. We're on the tops now, as the riders would say. We're now going down to on the big descent away from the top of the climbs. The peloton are thundering along, and there's only one man left to pick up before we are going to be treated to a rip-roaring descent to a left turn to the finish. Jack Bauer, now he rode the time trial for the first time a couple of weeks ago in his national championship, and he won it. Well, now he's going to have to do it all again to stay away from the field.
He is, but look at the angry mood at the front of the peloton, stretched out into a long line, and it was interesting as we went through the town of Lobethal just a few moments ago. We switched away on the camera shot, and then all of a sudden we came back and there was only one man in the lead, and when we looked for Cam Meyer, he wasn't there. We have no idea what happened to him. Nothing came over race radio, but he just got picked up by the main field very quickly, just leaving now just one rider in the lead of this race, and that's Jack Bauer, hovering on around about 45 seconds as we start the first part of the descent, because this descent is kind of split into two halves. You go down into Cuddly Creek, then there's still that nasty little sharp ascent before you start the descent, the final descent of Gorge Road.
This is a fabulous descent, Rob. Even I've done this, by the way, with the local cyclists. We've had a Great Pine, Lobethal, and then we've done it. You could freewheel literally into the suburbs of Adelaide.
So just putting in a little bit more ballast to
just
carry
to get the
down
weight,
the
to get the forward motion.
Yes, that's the way.
Yes.
I love a descent myself, and this is a beautiful, wide but winding descent, and speeds of 80+ kilometres an hour. But as Paul said, the riders have still got to come through Cuddly Creek. It doesn't go down as much, and there's even a couple of little kickers, and they've got to make their way past the bottom of Mount Torrens Road, which they raced up, of course, on stage 2 of this race. So there are a few up and downs until they get to the dam wall, and that's where it really dives down super fast and winding. I'm not so sure Jack Bauer's going to get that far on his own.
He's going to give it his best shot.
He'll give it his best shot, but the fact is this part of the descent is not that technical. If it was more technical with sharper corners, I'd give him the advantage. But here he could do with a mate alongside him just to get a little bit of respite, to recover a fraction before pushing the speed back up to 80 kilometres an hour.
You see he's getting chased by a combination of 3 or 4 riders at the front of the peloton. One swings off, another goes through. 72 kilometres an hour, Bauer. Still not as steep down, but he's got that big run off that steep hill, and it continues all the way down to the left-hand turn at Cuddly Creek to bring him onto the Gorge Road.
I mean, even if he makes it to the left-hand turn, it's uphill to the finishing line. It's a full kilometre. He'd need at least 15 seconds to survive.
And that's the problem as well when you've been away for such a long period of time. You will find this final climb up to the finishing line almost interminable.
Just moments ago this happened, and it looks to me as though one of the UniSA boys,
Miles Scottson.
It's Miles Scottson. Oh dear, well that's a blow to Team BMC. Of course, he's a great pacemaker, so black tyre for him, and I'm afraid he's never going to catch up now.
I would say that'd be technically or theoretically almost impossible, but when you know you've got to get back up there to help your teammate who's leading this bike race overall, with about 25 minutes of racing left to go, sometimes youthful enthusiasm can inspire you.
Also a bit of local knowledge, his track background, he's a great time trial, he's got a lot of leg speed, but he's a guy, he's from Gawler, he knows this area very, very well. So if anyone can get back, I think Miles could give it a go, because they haven't used him in the chase at all today yet. I think they would have been saving him for the dive down Gorge Road to help position Richie Porte and just keep him at the front and out of trouble. So someone else is going to have to do a double shift.
I think they've got the firepower on the team, so there's not going to be too much concern. All Richie Porte and all the overall leaders want to do is arrive safely at the finish today. There's Cam Meyer at the back here, so he's just hanging on now, happy to let the world go by. Thomas Agent in front of him hasn't done anything today to keep that polka dot jersey for himself, still remains equal with Richie Porte, so he's second.
You start to see the black and white jersey moving forward now here of Sunweb. They've also got a very good sprinter. There are a number of very fast riders who have come to this Santos Tour Down Under. The rider that they are working for is Nikias Arndt. It's a bit of a tense moment because we keep looking at Jack Bauer, who looks very powerful, doesn't look like a rider who's going to weaken at all on the running down towards the finishing line. So it's really a question of he's going to hang out there for as long as possible. It's the responsibility of the main field to find the firepower in their midst to pull him back.
21 kilometres to go, and I like the way he's using the full closed road here, clipping off the apexes of the bends. Looks like we're going on one of those little false flats just now as they get a little bit of a kicker up front. And there you can see now in relationship the bunch to the lone leader. There's still a good gap.
Yeah, well, actually, looking at that, I just took an unofficial time check myself, Robbie, on that tree there, and I put it at 25 seconds. Don't forget, if you're following the coverage here, you can follow us at Tour Down Under and get involved with your questions with the hashtag AskRobbieTDU. Well, that was the 20 kilometre to go banner there, which is around about 12.5 miles of racing.
Today it's the 22 kilometre to go banner, so maybe there's no room to set it up at 20 kilometres to go. Bit of a narrow winding road, and logistics is a tough gig.
Yeah, well, 25 seconds the advantage. That's not really very much more than about 400 metres. Once the road stretches out into a straight line, they'll have him in their sights. Madonna Buta asked Robbie, well, when the pro riders go down in a crash, are they permitted pain medication for injuries?
There are medications permitted for that sort of thing. It's highly regulated. The things that are permitted really don't make much of a difference. We're talking a bit of Panadol Forte.
Number 26 has got himself back into the main field. You were right, Robbie, about that. So that was
problem
nice
is
to see.
getting past it now, getting himself to the front and up to Richie Porte, but he's already back. That was quick.
Very, very quick, and that's important. So, yes, obviously, pain medication is well controlled, and there are doctors in cars and on motorbikes behind this bike race. Another question coming in here from Demon Force. Did you find your experience in BMX useful in dealing with the jostling associated with road race sprint finishes?
Absolutely. I grew up shoulder to shoulder and elbow to elbow, and I just thought that was the normal way of riding the bike until I started cycling. Some people said, that's normally reserved for the setup for the sprint finish, and and not in the sprint itself so much. But yes, definitely helped.
The agility and the manoeuvrability on a bike from BMX riding, but also a lot of riders now coming into the sport from mountain bike racing too. So let's see if we've got any more questions. Leo Zimmerman, can Richie win again on Wollonga, or will he play it safe and just prevent attacks from Chavez, etc.?
I asked Richie himself. I asked him this morning. I said, is the best defence attack? He said, well, it might be, but it'll be in a different way than I've done it the other years. He said, the other years I really had to be the aggressor and go first. He said, I'll see that I've got everything under control. If the situation is right, somebody else goes, and I think I can make it. Why not? I'd like to win there again, and in the jersey. And I'd also like Froomey to be watching it on TV. He said he's been sending me messages during the week, so I know he's watching.
Well, a little bit of banter between two very good friends actually off the bike, but two very big rivals, especially when we get to the month of July and the rendezvous of the Tour de France. So there you can just see in that ochre jersey right in the middle is a comfortable for the moment looking Richie Porte, but he will be remaining very attentive and staying towards the front end of this pack.
As we go through the technical quarters, it is great news for Jack Bauer. He's added on a few seconds now. It's come through at 33 over race radio. And Bauer is using the technical part to gain.
Yeah, I think it's the fact that we've gone into this part where you've got the tighter little corners that he's been able to pick his way around here. And maybe in the main field they're taking a little bit more caution, Robbie, because the riders like Richie Porte, who are sitting in the first 10 to 12 positions, they don't want to take risks at a moment like this. And they realise as well from experience and having done this descent so many times that as it straightens out as we get closer towards the outskirts of Campbelltown, that's the point where they need to pick up the pace and try and pull him back.
Well, that's another thing Richie Porte said this morning when I was chatting to him. He'd much prefer that there was a really hard chase on down the Gorge Road. It keeps things strung out a lot more. If you can ride in those first 10 or 12 positions, you don't need to touch the brakes. You can flow through the corners, hold momentum. The further back you are, the more the concertinas bunches up, the more there's changing of position. And of course, that equals danger.
Peloton now is stretching over a couple of hundred or more meters here. Gap has nosed out a little bit. Jack Bauer is driving. He's now inside 20 kilometers to go. As they watch the corners on this road, because as you can see, this not so clever on the edges. The middle's fine, but it continues to twist and kick. Cuddly Creek's got the right idea. That runs in parallel with this road. And this a sharp end, Paul. If I remember rightly, this is the corner where we had a faller a couple of years ago.
Yeah, it's a very technical descent, Robbie. You've done this a number of times, and you must remember as a bike rider where the most dangerous corners are.
You've got to remember where they are. There's one particular corner a bit further down that really goes hard back on itself. I just noticed Jack Bauer there positioning himself really on the extreme right-hand side of the road as he approached that sharp left-hand bend, so he can dive in, find the real apex of that corner, hold a high speed. But a lot of the riders have ridden this road many times, and also their directors have made notes of where the most dangerous corners are, and they'll be reminding them of just that.
The other thing as well to remember is this is a country road, and when you get to the edge, it's nice tarmac in the middle, but just to the edge it cracks up a bit.
Can get a little bit dusty and dirty as well, where some cars have gone into the gravel a bit, spread a bit of grit onto the road, so it can be very, very dodgy down this road for the riders, especially at the end of a long, tough stage where heart rates are up, concentration levels are down. It's easy to make a mistake.
Well, we're just passing the area where we turned for Paracombe and the big finish there. On the bottom of our picture, if we catch a glimpse of the road here, but this time we go straight on. We continue our descent down, and the gritting of the teeth of the Kiwi Jack Bauer there rides for his new Belgium team. They'll be pleased with they've signed him today when they've seen what he's done. The race being spearheaded now by a number of teams. Orica's got themselves at last back in charge, and I think it's Darrell Impey's got himself on the front.
Well, Robbie, if it was a flat run into the finish at 20 kilometres, 30 seconds, I would say absolutely no chance at all. But I'm going to ask you now, with 33 seconds and still some downhill to go, can he win?
No, I think he's a sitting duck, and he's just about to come. There's the turn-off just on the right-hand side of picture. That was the turn-off to Mount Torrens Road of Paracombe. The bunch is only just one corner away from Jack Bauer. What I noticed in that last shot we saw of the bunch, an Orica rider on the front that's stacked up behind him in a single file line, 5 riders from Sunweb.
Hey,
so they'll be keen on a sprint.
They've slowed down.
Aren't.
They've slowed down. They have slowed down. And what has happened here with Damien Howson? He's had enough, I think.
I just heard something interesting. Damien Howson is doing it a little bit tough. He said, how's this possible? He must be sitting behind the motorbike because I'm doing 600 watts riding on the front. I can tell him now, Jack Bauer's not sitting on the motorbike. Jack Bauer is in form. Sorry, Damo, he matched you.
Well, there he is for all to see. This is all his own work, very much so, and he's getting on with it. And Jack Bauer, is he converting this into a victory? What a ride it would be. We've still a long way to go, but it is all downhill, high speed. He's got no more gears on that bike. He's using the biggest gear he's got.
So if Damien Howson is putting out 600 watts and this guy is not getting caught, are you going to change your idea? Is he going to stay clear?
I still don't think he's going to stay clear, but it's a very impressive performance from Jack Bauer. Man in form, New Zealand time trial champion. He's in great condition. It just gets frustrating when you're chasing someone, you're doing everything you can. You see what your computer is saying, you're just not pulling them back. You want to find a reason why it's not happening.
Well, as we continue to try and keep this going, now they've got Turbo Durbo back on the front here. Luke Durbridge. Damien Howson has done his best and he's dropped off the back now, and now it's up to Durbridge. Another rush on the outside. To me, they appear to rethink the situation there. It may have cost them a couple of seconds.
Yes, but I think they're still waiting for the moment when they really want to crank up the pressure. They backed off a little bit because they know that 30 seconds it's only 400 metres at speeds like this.
I think they weren't quite prepared for Damien Howson to blow up exactly when he did. They didn't have the reinforcements there already. So it took a few moments for then Luke Durbridge to get to the front. And in his wheel was Daryl Impey. But now the car has gone past Jack Bauer. That's a sign that they're starting to close it down. That's Durbridge and Impey on the front driving the pace. And still with Sunweb sitting behind them. So although he's able to hold off Howson, you bring fresh horses to the front, they're going to make an impact.
Another little rise there. They're saying 20 seconds from the radio now. 20 seconds, and it's a little kicker upwards again. Just makes those legs ache. Ventoso on the back here now for BMC. Their job may be done for the day.
And Armel Moinard, their number 24, they've done a lot of pacemaking, and they're just scrambling to try and stay in contact, having put all of their energy on the line for their leader and the leader of this bike race, Richie Porte.
Well, where they are now is that last little kick up. Before they get a flat section, they go past the dam wall where the water supply is, and then they'll start that really fast dive down, sweeping left-hander into a right curve. You see the big cliff face. So there'll be a bit of a race across this section, be at the front. And Richie Porte in second position, right behind his teammate from BMC, which is Damiano Caruso.
Yeah, I'm not worried yet.
There's
still a chance here.
That's the international sign, Robbie, that we know.
Yeah.
It's all over.
It's finished.
Got nothing left. But there's still high speed, and as we said just the other day, the faster it is, the more it's stretched out into a long line, the safer it is at the front end of the main field. And Richie Porte right now will be just counting out the times, but he is starting to run out of teammates.
Thought he was taking that one a bit wide, but he's got it right again now, and he's still plenty of fight in here. We're up by the dam heads now before we start and finish off our descent down to that left turn.
Well, that's the dam you can see off to the left-hand side. So this is the flatter section before they start to dive down. You saw Jack Bauer start to send it wide through one of those bends. You see it just dipping down behind. So he's really starting to pick up the speed now as he gets one of those nice steeper downhill sections. Bit of relief for the legs, and as it goes down even harder, you'll see him get down into that aero tuck and try and maximise and hang on to this advantage as much as he can.
Gosh, what a day it's turned out to be for Jack Bauer. First of all, breaking clear with Cam Meyer and Andres Sink. Sink goes first, Meyer goes second, and now Jack desperately trying to get to the finish, just a few seconds ahead of the field.
Well, he's on the wiggly part of the course on the map, but the race radio is saying his gap is around about 20 seconds, so it's down to around about 250 to 300 metres. Riding to the front of the peloton there, you can see Caleb Ewan, number 6.
Oh, a bit surprised to see him quite that far up the peloton at the moment. It's Jacques Rensser van Rensburg coming up on the right-hand side in that white jersey with the South African flag. He's the national champion, throwing his weight behind the chase now. They've got the big sprinters too on dimension data. Another one moved up there is Nathan Haas, 52, and he's riding well. Mark Renshaw is 51.
Number 5 is starting to get up there. Luke Durbridge. He's put a lot of power.
Is the champion up on the front there at the moment. Yeah.
I've got to say here, Luke Durbridge is doing a great job here this afternoon.
He's doing a great job, and the team's trying to establish themselves at the front. And I just saw Ian Stannard look to the side and think, I'll just force myself in on the wheel. He looked to his right, saw Mark Renshaw and thought, I'll just wait till he passes. I might go in behind him.
Well,
you don't tangle with Renshaw.
Oh, you do not.
Well, they're close now. It is now 12 seconds, but we've got back on the downhill.
I remember seeing Mark Renshaw in the Goodwill Games in Brisbane many years ago. 75, 80 kilometres an hour. Well, to finish the story, Mark Renshaw bouncing off the great big American sprinter Martin Austin, and he wasn't scared at all of Big Marty.
He can handle himself, and look at the bunch round that right hand bend, and this is where it really starts to dip down in between that steep part of the gorge. Jack Bauer now on the fastest part of the course today through the left hander, swinging into this right. He's in his biggest gear, only able to give it a few pedals before he has to tuck down, rail this corner. But the bunch is really not far behind, and they will be able to use their power in numbers on this next part of road where it opens up a bit just here.
2 more gone, 10 seconds the gap now. The pursuit is very much on here. Our camera might pick him up. The peloton stringing out now. They're being driven on by the teams of the sprinters, and the sprinters themselves have got themselves up near the front now.
Well, you know what, Robbie, you know, you are retired from the sport, but when you get into the commentary position and you see a run down towards a finish like this, the excitement has to come back, because you know where you've got to be, you know what risks you've got to take.
I've got to admit, the heart rate has just increased a little bit, the adrenaline's starting to go, and I'm sitting on the edge of this plastic chair trying to get an even better look, put my nose up against the screen. But Jack Bauer just 10 seconds in front. 2 years ago, the group of Bobridge had 40 seconds and hung on by a matter of lengths. So I don't think he's going to stay away, and I'm looking forward to seeing the battle between Ewan and Sagan. Possibly Danny Van Poppel gets a better run today, and the sprinters will now start to flick that switch.
9 kilometres to go, and at the speed they're going now, we're going to get down there in about 12 minutes or less.
There he is, and that's we just saw, we got a brief indication of physically the difference between them, and then it's not very much more than 100 metres. There's the front end, the business end of the main field.
That's the turn off to Corkscrew Road on their left-hand side. So this is where the road flattens out. They're nearly at the end of the gorge road here, but they've still got a bit of winding stuff to go, but he hasn't got enough of a gap to stay clear.
Well, even if he's clear to the corner, he's not going to hold that sort of a gap up to the finishing line today now. Thomas Agent has come to the back of the race.
Well, to put it into perspective,
10-second holding.
He's holding on to 10 seconds, but this final 8 kilometres, they're probably, Robbie, going to run it off in just over 9 minutes.
Yep.
If it wasn't for all the bends, they would average 60k an hour, at least until the left-hand turn at 1 kilometre to go. Goes up, dips down a little bit, and then drags up to the finish line, and they've got him in sight. So on this winding road where you really can't see far, they've already spotted him.
Desperate moments for Jack. They will have just caught sight of him as he went round that corner. They know exactly where he is now. 7 kilometres left to run. Once we turn left into Maryvale Road, then it's a simple matter of 1 kilometre. They'll see the banner as soon as they make the turn, and then it's a gradual uphill sprint. Here he is now, Jack Bauer, the national time trial champion of New Zealand, giving this his best shot. What an incredible strong ride he's put up, but I think he's going to fall just a little bit short.
I agree with you 100% there, Phil. Now, talking about this final straight, as they go through that left-hander and up, it kicks up 2-3%, dips down again. Now, the drag up to the finish line, riders will tend to go from about the 200-metre to go mark with their full sprint, but the drag uphill, in terms of seconds, makes it a longer sprint. So you're really going to have to think carefully about where you start your effort in the sprint, because 200 metres will play as if it's 240.
Right, yeah. It's a great sprint.
It's
a great
beautiful
sprinter's
sprint.
approach. Yeah, for us too, it'd be great.
Also gives riders a chance to rectify any small mistake because things are happening slightly slower. It's not a really high-speed sprint. This is the corner I was talking about earlier that's caught so many people out. Goes back on itself, and especially when you're at heart rates like he would be after the effort that he's put in, it's hard to get every corner right.
Let's hope the peloton get it right. There's much more of a problem for them. Not sure where we are now. That's Jack. Here comes the peloton. She gets away again on these bends.
You've also got to think that the teams behind leading the chase, they're also thinking about their sprinter. In the case of Orica Scott, thinking about Caleb Ewan, Esteban Chavez, BMC thinking about Richie Port. They don't want to overcook it. Same sort of thing. Another left-hander that really tightens up on itself. He's used all of the road out to the guardrail. So back in the bunch, they're going to ease off just that little bit more because they don't want their team leaders to be in danger of crashing. And that's why you open up that gap a little bit more by taking every risk, as we saw.
5 kilometres to the left turn before we race up towards the line now. Team Sky are still very much in this mix. 41, Geraint Thomas. The sprinter they are trying to protect down there is Danny Van Poppel, and his number is 47. You can see him tucked at the bottom of the picture there. His teammates are in front. But they did this yesterday. They were in exactly the right position, and in fact Danny couldn't quite deliver. Maybe today.
Yeah, I think yesterday they hit the front at a good time, but they just got a little bit caught out by the headwind in Victor Harbour on the finishing straight. Weren't able to really pull him up to top speed and deliver him, and that enabled Sagan and Caleb Ewan to take a run out of the wheels and come back. Top of picture above Sagan, Esteban Chavez, and Jack Bauer really taking every risk to get as far as possible. Nearly gone out to the guardrail again. Look how tight that corner is.
Well, they're saying the gap is now 5 seconds at 5 kilometres from the finish, so it's going to be curtains for Jack in the next couple of kilometres for sure. And then the sprint will continue, the descent rather, will continue all the way to that left-hand turn. It's been an incredible piece of cycling by Jack Bauer today. And we've had the chance to watch the whole thing here.
Well, I wonder, Phil, if they might have awarded that joint most aggressive rider a little bit too early today, because Jack Bauer, what a ride.
I think they might change it if they can, because there's no doubt who the most competitive rider was today, and he's right in front of our camera now. He is not going to give up. They've got to come to him. They're talking of 50 metres. See for yourself as the race comes down to a battle of the sprinters once more.
The team's in control of the peloton at the moment. There's a Sunweb rider at the front, still Orica Scott. Team Sky poised and trying to get their timing right and deliver Danny Van Poppel, who told me this morning he's super motivated. He knows apart from Sunday, this is the last chance because he's going to do a lot of suffering tomorrow.
I think the Sunweb rider is Johannes Freilinger. He's been doing a lot of work for the team, and so too has Wilco Kelderman, who is really an overall favourite. He's been working very hard on the front as well. Nicky Assant is their sprinter. Another little false flat, and Jack has taken a look, and it must have been a horrible sight to see the faces of the peloton boring down on him. 5 or 6 seconds, if that, maybe 4.
For the first time I saw a sign of him easing off the pedals somewhat and let himself go back now, and there it is. Here comes the catch by...
Well done, Jack Bauer. That was an incredible attempt. It was 4K, 3 kilometres. He's just about to hit the 3 kilometre sign, and it's all over. Real shame. But as Jens Voigt has always said, if you don't try, you don't win anything, and Jack tried today. Now the field, at least the sharp end of the field, probably about the front 30 riders are thinking of winning the stage now. The rest is just trying to get home.
Well, this is the end of the gorge road, where it really is still a gorge. The road really opens up. They'll go over the top of this rise and it starts to go gradually down. They'll pick up a lot of speed, and it's a chance for teams to bring their sprinter and bring their team leaders to the front before that left-hand turn. It's less than 2 kilometres to go until the left-hand turn into Maryvale Road. So this is like a sprint before the sprint to get positioned in the turn, because the GC riders are all wary of a split in the peloton as they rise up towards the finish line.
Well, Cannondale also trying to get into the mix here in those lime green jerseys. Well, all the riders are now safe as far as accidents go. They would be given the same time. The Sky Boys are trying to get through on the outside. Number 47 is the man they're trying to lead up to the front of the race. And they're all racing now. There's a race within itself. They're racing for the left-hand turn to position their sprinters for the last kilometre on the drag to the line. And this is a really difficult situation, isn't it, Robbie, to get your man in the right position right now.
And this is a very dangerous moment. The setup for the sprint. Richie Port, he's on his own in there, finding his own way to the front. Whoever the rider is on the front, when they switch from the right to the left-hand side and back again, creates a big wave across the road. And if you're coming up one side at speed, it really can take out half the bunch. So it's a really dangerous moment. Dimension Data now on the right-hand side of picture. Swing across to the left. There's Richie Port at the front. Still no sign of Sagan. Here comes Caleb Ewan in the wheel of Daryl Impey. Number 6 in the orange, in the red points jersey. Peter Sagan again glued to Caleb Ewan's wheel. He got beaten yesterday. He got beaten last Sunday. Sagan wants this one, and it's a sprint that suits him.
Sagan has already said he has the utmost respect for Caleb Ewan. He thinks he's a fabulous bike rider, and that's a big compliment. Now we're getting ready for the left-hander here. And Caleb's put himself in the right place. Richie Porter's got himself out of trouble. He doesn't want any shunt at this stage of the game.
Sagan nearly going down between wheels there. Sky coming up on the right track. Segafredo in red on the extreme right-hand side.
And
Sagan's
there's the
lost
kilometre.
the wheel. Sagan has a lot of work to do to get back to the wheel of Caleb Ewan now. Daryl Impey still there to pull the sprint. And where is Roger Kluger, the sprint lead-out man for Ewan?
Now as they start the lead-outs, got to watch it here. They jump for the line, and look at this now. It's Kluger trying to take on the rest of them here. As the rider who's leading is Daryl Impey on the far right, but the rider who's broken away from Borough, I'm not exactly sure who it is. But he took him as straight as he came off here. It might be Michael Kohler who's come off on that corner. As a little rise comes up here, but has he stolen the day of the sprinters? It is Daryl Impey who's trying to pull Caleb Ewan, and there's a break on the left by Team Sky. They've got Danny Van Poppel hooked up nicely at the moment. Through the heat haze now. Van Poppel is the second wheel here. Caleb Ewan's going to have to find something special now. This time Van Poppel goes. Caleb Ewan in the red jersey's got onto the back wheel of Van Poppel. Caleb Ewan is coming out of the pack with another show of enormous strength. He wins again. Sagan is second. This man is unstoppable.
Well, Phil, he was boxed in. He chose the right-hand side. He was pinned up against the barriers. He was patient. He waited for the gap to open behind Van Poppel and popped through the gap, as it were. But Van Poppel went from a long way out, challenged Ewan to come back. And where on earth did Peter Sagan come from? I think he may have ridden himself into second. But Caleb Ewan, he is unstoppable here. It wasn't a clean, organised sprint. And like yesterday, his decision-making, picking his way through the bunch. So we get to see it here from overhead. Team Sky getting their timing a lot better, catching the Bora rider. The big lead out there. And look on the right-hand side. Edward turns completely boxed in. Ewan throws himself out of there, waits for the gap. Peter Sagan, he says, I'll follow that through, but he's lost the wheel already. Ewan gone. Sagan goes back to the left-hand side, but Caleb down low. Too quick, too strong. He's too good a form.
In tremendous form, Caleb Ewan. 4 days of the Santos Tour Down Under. This man has won 3 of them. The crowd have enjoyed that. The world champion has done another long run for the line, as he did yesterday, beaten by the same man. Second place for Peter Sagan. Van Poppel in third place. Ben Swift just there in fourth place. Nathan Haas in fifth. That's the way it looked over the line. But this man cannot do a thing wrong for Orica Scott. 6th win in January. Well, he's going to make an interesting interview when Paul Sherwin can catch him, because he's gone straight through the town. He's almost gone back to the start line at Norwood Parade. There's Caleb Ewan wins the stage here. Peter Sagan second, Van Poppel, Ben Swift, it was Nathan Hart in the 5th place, Baptiste Plancard in 6th. Jay McCarthy having a go, he got past in the final run-in, he was in 7th, trying to bring Sagan to the line. Callum Scottson, good result for the youngster, the brother of Miles, and the top 10 completed by Battaglin. What a sprint that was.
Well,
So,
what a day has it been. We've had the breakaway off the front, chased all day. Jack Bauer resisting as long as possible, but Caleb